Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku become 𝐬𝐻 teacher part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 2, comment down below. And let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story aliferent from 𝐬𝐻. So let's start the video. 𝐬𝐻𝐭 still couldn't help but wonder. Was her bumbling childhood babysitter ever going to get himself a girlfriend? Or a boyfriend? 𝐬𝐻𝐭 doesn't judge either way, considering said childhood babysitter was the worst 𝗵𝘃𝐻 disaster in the history of 𝗵𝘃𝐻 disasters. This was probably the biggest reason 𝐬𝐻𝐭 welcomed the arrival of one Todoroki 𝐬𝐻 with open arms. Years later, it would be Midoriya 𝐬𝐻. But no one's really taking that technicality into account. It started on a sunny day. Well, evening, just before classes for high school at the 𝐬𝐻 Academy started. 𝐬𝐻𝐭 and 𝐘𝐻𝐬, her dumb as hell childhood best friend, were jogging in the evening when they met up with the aforementioned bumbling childhood babysitter at the park. One Midoriya 𝐍𝐻𝐬, or Deku, as 𝐬𝐻𝐭 fondly called him at 𝐘𝐻𝐬's suggestion, which was infinitely more nefarious for a child of 4. But hence why 𝐬𝐻𝐭 tried to make it more positive, was a staggering hunk of a man. Don't call out 𝐬𝐻𝐭 for this, please, who happened to be 9 years older than them, and just out of a master degree in arts. And he was the sweetest guy in the world who definitely deserved a love interest. 𝐬𝐻𝐭 will make sure of him getting a love interest, because he deserved one, okay? He really did. He deserved a sweet, kind, pretty love interest and a happy marriage with said love interest, and she sure as hell would be the flower girl at his wedding. Hey guys, Izuku called with a friendly smile, and 𝐬𝐻𝐭 waved at him while 𝐘𝐻𝐬 clicked his tongue in greeting. Hey, you look happy. That job interview go okay? 𝐬𝐻𝐭 greets, waving. Izuku actually wanted to be a comic writer, just like the great and mysterious Yagi, who had made it big in the comic industry by his hit comic series All Might's Legendary Adventures in Heroism, which also happened to be Izuku's favorite, as well as his main inspiration for becoming a comic writer after having published it in Japan's biggest publisher company, One for All Comics Limited. But considering he was only 24, he had decided getting a job first, and getting some income was definitely more profitable. 𝐬𝐻𝐭 knew he was stuck on the story though. Izuku was a wonderful artist, but he didn't have much faith in his storytelling abilities, which was stupid, because 𝐬𝐻𝐭 remembers how well he used to tell her and 𝐘𝐻𝐬 bedtime stories. He could make a wonderful comic writer. Truly, if anyone deserved success, it would be Izuku, with how hard he worked on his dream and how much he believed in said dream. Definitely. Izuku grinned, making a thumbs up with one hand while slurping down an energy drink with the other. Yeah, he said, green eyes shining. 𝐹𝐷 hell. About time. 𝐘𝐻𝐬 said bluntly, and 𝐬𝐻𝐭 cheered. Where's the job at? And what is the job anyway? 𝐬𝐻𝐭 asks, tilting her head to the side curiously. To their surprise, Izuku only smirked, turning fully to face the duo. 𝐬𝐻𝐭 blinked, while 𝐘𝐻𝐬 narrowed his eyes in suspicion. Something was almost foreboding with the wide smirk on Izuku's face, mostly because he never smirked unless something really karma-inducing was happening, or unless something really funny was going on. 𝐬𝐻𝐭 now exchanged a suspicious look with 𝐘𝐻𝐬, before the duo raised their eyebrows at Izuku, who just smirked wider. Ah, you guys are gonna find out tomorrow anyway. It's a surprise, Izuku said cheerfully, making a peace sign. 𝐘𝐻𝐬 raised an eyebrow even further. The 𝐹𝐷 is it a surprise for? It'd be less fun that way, I've heard, Izuku says simply, grinning. 𝐬𝐻𝐭 and 𝐘𝐻𝐬 exchanged another suspicious look. By the time they both went to bed, both of them were confused as to why all their parents and old Mr. Yagi and his husband next door kept giggling the whole dinner. Well, Mr. Yagi's husband just grinned creepily. But you get the general idea. It also didn't make any sense when Mr. Yagi's husband, Yagi 𝐬𝐻, kept snorting into his plate when 𝐘𝐻𝐬 offhandedly asked him who their homeroom teacher would be, considering he was at 𝐬𝐻. And as well, it also did not make any sense whatsoever when the whole brood of adults suddenly laughed or grinned. If you were Mr. 𝐬𝐻 too much for it to be not suspicious. When they went to school next day, however, it made too much sense. Horrifying sense. 𝐬𝐻𝐭 and 𝐘𝐻𝐬 arrived at the huge classroom together, before nodding at each other in understanding. High school meant a whole different life from elementary, middle school, and everything they had been through together. So, while they were each other's best friends, they should branch out. Lord knew 𝐬𝐻𝐭 needed less loud people anyway. She then spotted a green-haired girl talking to a black-haired boy with a black bandana and red eyes, biting her lip before deciding that the girl seemed really nice. "Hi," 𝐀𝐦 greeted, sitting next to the girl. "Hi," the girl said, sounding very friendly. 𝐀𝐦 breathed easy before tentatively looking at the guy, who met her stare evenly and rather unnervingly, if she was being honest. But the girl must have noticed her distress, because she only chuckled and shrugged before speaking. "𝐓𝐡𝐢𝐬 doesn't bite. I'm a 𝐬𝐲 𝐍𝐴 𝐬𝐴 blushed first names right off the bat then. Wow. This girl was something else. "I'm Uraraka 𝐀𝐻. Nice to meet you, Su-chan. And Takoyami 𝐓𝐡𝐢𝐬. And Tsuyu likes it better when you call it by her first name, by the way," the boy said, holding out a hand to shake. 𝐀𝐻 smiled, shaking his hand. "That explains a lot. You guys friends then?" Tsuyu nodded. "Yeah. We've been friends since middle school. Any friends you had that are here, 𝐀𝐻-chan?" 𝐀𝐻 chuckled. "Yeah. 𝐵𝑃𝑢 Katsuki. We've been friends since we were 4. Takoyami raised an eyebrow. "Wow. That's lucky, 𝐀𝐻-chan," Tsuyu says, looking curious. 𝐀𝐻 laughed. "Well, he's a kind of a loudmouth, but he's not boring to be around. Or at least he started to be nice to be around, after 𝐀𝐻 angrily beat him up for his attitude problems back in their first year of middle school. She loved Katsuki, don't get her wrong, but the guy practically had a superiority complex that bordered on arrogant. It wasn't anything people needed to know, though." Tsuyu peeked curiously in the direction 𝐀𝐻's eyes had unknowingly drifted off to. "Oh, you mean the loud blonde guy telling everyone to die?" 𝐀𝐻's smile was on the verge of becoming a grimace. Sounds like him. You must be pretty tough to have been friends with him," Takoyami muttered, sounding amused. 𝐀𝐻 blushed at the compliment. Takoyami definitely was friendlier than he seemed. Well, Katsuki-kun is a whole new species on his own. The species of extremely loud mammalian humanoids. 𝐀𝐻 and Tsuyu giggled. Takoyami's eyes lingered a little too long on the way Tsuyu smiled, and 𝐀𝐻 peeked in interest before quietly slapping her palms together as she saw Takoyami blushing. "Oh, a crush?" 𝐀𝐻 hid a grin. High school was already looking so fun. Of course, that's when the universe decided to let her know what all the adults had found so funny at last night's dinner. See, when Katsuki was told that his next-door neighbor, one Midoriya Izuku, was going to get a job, not in 100 years would he have dreamed that the guy was going to be his homeroom/history teacher. Katsuki knew Izuku pretty well. Izuku, being 9 years older, often babysat Katsuki, and as far as Katsuki knew, the guy had wanted to be a writer. Or a comic book writer. He thought it suited Izuku well. Of freaking course the old nerd wanted to be a comic book writer. Katsuki thought Izuku had been lame, back when he had been in kindergarten, and hadn't known any better. But then, one day, he saw Izuku standing up to a high school bully, even though the guy himself was a scrawny middle school kid at the time. He saw Izuku screaming at the bully, and then defending a kid from said bully with nothing but a trash can lid, like he was Captain FC King America or something. That's when Katsuki knew that Izuku was the farthest thing from lame. Izuku beat up a bully way older than him with a trash can lid. There wasn't any conceivable idea of him being lame in Katsuki's head after that. Not that he'd confessed to it. Also, when he realized Izuku had in fact been getting coached for wrestling and boxing in his spare time. Boxing. Katsuki liked to think of himself as a successful karate black belt. But Izuku was a FC King boxer. Katsuki could get kneed in the nuts before he knew what the FCK was happening. In fact, Izuku had done that to him. Once. With a lot of profuse apologies, yes. But he still did it. And he was capable of doing it again, so, best not to mess with the guy. So to walk into his classroom, sit there, wait for the extras to be FC King quiet, and for the homeroom teacher to get their ass over here already, only to find a very familiar man, tall, stocky, broad and green-haired with a horrifyingly familiar undercut. The very same man Katsuki had gruffly congratulated on getting a job for the time being last night. Walking into the classroom and introduce himself as the homeroom teacher, you could hardly blame Katsuki for screaming. In fact, Uraraka didn't blame him for screaming either, if the way she was gaping at their homeroom teacher was a good indicator. Midoriya Izuku, the absolute bastard, only grinned impishly as he took the attendance book. "Bakugo-kun, quiet please, or you're going to get detention on your first day," Izuku said mildly, snickering when no one was FC King looking as he checked the attendance book. People stared at Izuku in amazement. "You're my homeroom teacher," Katsuki yelled, looking horrified, standing up and pointing accusingly at the college graduate. A college graduate who also happened to be his babysitter was his 𝐹𝐶𝐭 high school homeroom teacher. "That's what I said." "Yes. And you also remember that other thing I was saying about? Something about." "Aha. I think it was extra homework. I really don't want to threaten you on the first day. And I don't want to be that guy either. But unless you stop screaming, there's nothing else I can say to you, Bakugo-kun," Izuku says calmly. Not even looking at Katsuki once, and boy does it rile him up, because 𝐹𝐶𝐭 Izuku for being this much of a 𝐓𝐶𝐭. Katsuki gapes and sinks into his seat amidst snickers. Izuku grinned to himself, chuckling, and Katsuki watched in horror as the girls save for Uraraka swooned and blushed in varying degrees. 𝐹𝐶𝐭, even Ponytail was blushing, and she was so stiff and proper, damn it. People were muttering now, but Katsuki can't 𝐹𝐶𝐭 believe it. He and Uraraka got trolled. 𝐹𝐶𝐭 trolled by Izuku of all the people. People were staring at him, but 𝐹𝐶𝐭, Katsuki couldn't be blamed for this one, god damn it. Then again, Katsuki thought miserably. Izuku did play him good plenty of times. He wasn't going to forget the time Izuku had been pretending to cook katsudon, and instead gave him cold 𝐓𝐶𝐭 soba from the fridge as payback for Katsuki having tripped him up in his own house once. The old hag hadn't stopped laughing at Katsuki for days, and the grin on Izuku's face could have put 𝐓𝐶𝐭 Satan to shame. That had been 𝐓𝐶𝐭 terrifying. In fact, Katsuki sat up straight, a chill running up his spine. 𝐓𝐶𝐭. No wonder Izuku had been grinning like a shit-faced 𝐓𝐶𝐭 when Katsuki had congratulated him on getting a job last night. No 𝐓𝐶𝐭 wonder. He got Uraraka's befuddled gaze and nodded haplessly. We got played by him. And didn't Izuku 𝐓𝐶𝐭 know it? This can't be happening, Katsuki muttered, head still in his hands as the apocalypse loomed closer. He was going to die. That much he knew. Ochako couldn't believe it. But really, it should have made much more sense, horrifyingly enough. No wonder everyone had been laughing like they knew a joke she and Katsuki hadn't, because they did know the goddamn joke. Ochako just stared as Izuku cheerily took the attendance and introduced himself afterwards. "Hey, everyone, loosen up, everybody, because high school really is a lot more difficult without you feeling awkward about it the whole time," Izuku said, waving in a friendly manner as he placed the attendance book down. Ochako found herself smiling involuntarily, even though she wanted to do nothing more than punch Izuku square in the face. Of course, as an adult, he wasn't expected to share every detail of his life. But come on. This was just mean. "I'm Midoriya Izuku, and I'll be your homeroom teacher and your history teacher. And before you ask, I finished a master's degree in college, so don't worry about me being too young. I mean, it's a valid worry, so I wouldn't blame you, considering this is my first job teaching and everything. But enough of that, let's just try to have a great time together, okay?" Izuku asked, smiling slightly. Ochako found Takoyami staring at Izuku, as if he were a foreign species, while Tsuyu seemed impressed. Meanwhile, everybody nodded, now seeming much more at ease. Approving grins were on nearly every student's face now. She smiled wider. It didn't matter that Izuku had played them good. Not when he was giving his all, as he usually did. She could definitely feel a lot more comfortable with Izuku as her homeroom teacher. Orientation got over, so let's just do an icebreaker to pass the first day today. Everybody got a paper and a pen. Everybody nodded, and Ochako looked at Izuku bemusedly, before taking out her own paper and pen. Izuku nodded once he saw that everyone had a paper and pen. "Right. So, we'll get to know everybody for the time being. Now, I want you to write something about yourself on it. With your name, I really apologize, because I know how awkward it is. But getting to know people is always awkward, especially if you have to introduce yourself in front of the whole class and everything. I'd know," he said, smiling sheepishly. He then cleared his throat, chuckling in embarrassment. "One thing you guys have got to know is that I really go on tangents. If that bothers anyone, let me know, okay?" he asked, showing a tentative thumbs up. Everybody just chuckled and shook their heads, while he continued speaking. "Alright, so, you'll write down something about yourself that you like, or are comfortable sharing with everybody. And you place it here on the table as soon as you're done. I won't read, I promise, and you write your name on the other side. I call your name, and you come up here and read it out. Okay?" Everybody looked hesitant, and Ochako herself was unsure of this. Even Katsuki looked dumbfounded. But Izuku smiled brightly at them all, before sitting down. Guys, you're gonna be stuck in the same class for 3 years. I know high school sounds scary, and it is, trust me. But you gotta give this a leap of faith, okay? 𝐻𝐚𝐭 inhaled. Izuku's voice was comforting and gentle, and her mind inadvertently went to the time he comforted her after she resat a test once. It's okay, 𝐻𝐚𝐭. It really is. Resitting an exam is not the most disgusting thing that's happened. Your intelligence is on another level, and life isn't all about marks, you know? Alright? She could do this. He had said to write down something she was comfortable with. After all, right. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 took a piece of paper before sending an encouraging grin in Tsuyu's and Takoyami's directions, who smiled back and nodded at her respectively. On one side, I'd love to be an astronaut, and I don't get why people say physics is hard. I love physics. And on the other, she wrote her full name before breathing in and raising her hand. Izuku blinked before looking at her with a smile. You're Araka-san, done? Yeah, sensei. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 said, feeling weird all of a sudden. Calling Izuku sensei was just weird. God. Wow. He really was her teacher. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 swallowed and placed her paper on the desk. Izuku grinned at her, and 𝐻𝐚𝐭 looked around, making sure no one was seeing them, and upon seeing that everyone was busy writing, she blew a raspberry at him. Izuku chuckled and 𝐻𝐚𝐭 blew yet another raspberry before going back to her desk. She sat and waited after having given Izuku her paper, before Tsuyu got up hesitantly. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 gave her a thumbs up, and Tsuyu nodded with a smile, before placing it at Izuku's desk and returning. What'd you write? 𝐻𝐚𝐭 whispered to Tsuyu, who blushed. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 then laughed. It's okay, you don't have to tell me now. Tsuyu shrugged, tipping her finger against her chin. Ah no, I'll tell you. I really like frogs and the rainy weather. That's what I wrote. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 couldn't help but admired Tsuyu in that moment. Sure, she wasn't much of a frog person herself, but frogs were cute. To be honest, it made Tsuyu a lot cuter, too. She grinned. That's cool. I like frogs, too, Tsu-chan. I wrote that I liked physics and wanted to be an astronaut. She then blushed, twiddling her fingers together. Too soon? Tsuyu shook her head. It's nice, 𝐻𝐚𝐭-chan. Wanting to be an astronaut sounds very admirable, she said sincerely, making 𝐻𝐚𝐭 break out into a happy grin. Just then Takoyami finished his too, and sat next to Tsuyu soon enough. Tsuyu. Ah, 𝐓𝐴𝐻𝐿-chan. We were just talking about what we wrote, Tsuyu said, and Takoyami nodded. I wrote. He looked at 𝐻𝐚𝐭 hesitantly, who only gave him an encouraging grin. I wrote that I liked poetry and the darkness, Takoyami said, cheeks flushed. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 gave him a thumbs up, not sure what to respond to that, but each to their own was her philosophy, and Tsuyu just pat his arm. Soon enough, everybody had finished, and Izuku clapped his hands once to draw attention. Alright, guys, let's get this started. So, first off, Izuku blinked, momentarily taken aback. Okay, it's Bakugo Katsuki-kun, Bakugo-kun. Would you do the honors? Katsuki glared at him, but Izuku was more than used to his glares by now and only gave him a patient smile. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 watched as Katsuki stalked up to the table, hands in pockets, and Izuku then whispered something in his ear. Katsuki glared at him again, but Izuku gave him a firm look, eyes on the way Katsuki's uniform was disheveled and improper. Aha, 𝐻𝐚𝐭 grinned. Katsuki then sighed. After class. Izuku nodded, seeming satisfied. So, go ahead. Katsuki glared at him for the third time, before taking his paper and reading out his name in a bored voice. When he flipped the paper, his eyes got a maniacal glint to them, one 𝐻𝐚𝐭 associated with a general upcoming dose of annoyance, and she stared, chin on hand. This was going to go well. Really well. Katsuki pointed to himself with his thumb. I am going to be the FC King best, and there's nothing you extras can do about it, he declared, smirking. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 facepalmed, before catching Izuku's expression. Then she just grinned. Izuku had a very vacant expression on his face. I'm not sure how you're going to be the best, Bakugo-kun, if you misunderstood what I said. Izuku deadpanned, sounding very unimpressed. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 snorted into her fist, grinning as people started snickering. Oh, this really was going well. Katsuki stared at him. I understood what you said perfectly well, teach, he said, gritting his words out. I said, write down a fact. Not a declaration of war. Last I wrote a thesis on history. You usually declare war by declaring something like that for no good reason. Izuku deadpanned, causing snickers and laughter to erupt throughout the classroom. 𝐻𝐚𝐭, for one, was wheezing with laughter as Takoyami snorted. Hey, I know I'm the best. It's a fact, isn't it? You may, but these guys don't. You'll need to back your words up, Bakugo-kun. Facts are only facts if you've proven them, Izuku said, looking like he wanted to die. Or cry. Ochako just kept wheezing with laughter, body shaking with silent giggles. Wow, he really thinks highly of himself, huh? Bakugo-chan does, Tsuyu remarked, and Ochako laughed. Yeah, he does. Ochako wheezed out, grinning. How were you friends with him? Takoyami asked in wonder, as Katsuki blew a fuse right then and there. Ochako shrugged, grinning wider as the show went on. What do you mean I have to prove I'm the best? Please write something else. You'll be a few steps closer to proving you're the best if you write something more sensible, Izuku said, rubbing his forehead. The hell? Bakugo-kun, I'm telling you to go back to your desk and write something else, Izuku said, sighing. Katsuki glared at him before huffing and going back. Izuku exhaled. Okay, that was eventful, Ochako snorted. He doesn't say, she muttered, making Takoyami snort again. Izuku rolled his shoulders before looking at the next piece of paper. Alright, next up, Hitoshi Shinsu-kun. A purple-haired boy looking far too tired for a high schooler drudged up to the desk before reading out what he said. I like cats, and bicycles are better than cars, Shinsu said in a monotonous voice. Bicycles are better than cars, Shinsu-kun. Thank you, Izuku said, smiling when Shinsu gave him an unreadable look. Ochako then realized it was disbelief, before smiling to herself. Next up, Jiru Kyoyuka-san, Izuku said, and a blue-haired girl with earbuds around her neck hesitantly walked up, before reading out her paper. I like music a lot and my favorite instrument, for playing, is the guitar, Jiru said, sounding awkward, before looking back at Izuku tentatively. Izuku nodded, smile softer. I honestly respect you for being able to play the guitar. I tried it out once, but then I had to submit 3 theses off the bat. I forgot how to do it, but I remember it being really tough. You are really talented, Jiru-san. Jiru blushed, before bowing and muttering out a small thank you. People now looked at her with a lot more respect, as did Ochako. Izuku then took out the next paper. And here we have Kaminari Denki-kun. A blonde guy, cheerful yet somewhat spastic, walked up to the desk, before reading out what he wrote. My favorite actor is Takami Keigo, because seriously, any of you see him in Windfall? He's so cool. Kaminari burst out, grinning. Ochako could totally relate. Takami Keigo was only the hottest up-and-coming actor, and he had a lot of talent too. The whole reason she watched Windfall was to see how amazing Takami Keigo was. Ochako's mom often joked that if she watched her books as much as she watched Windfall, she wouldn't be stressing over English. Plus, she really wanted to find out the identity of the mysterious information broker who called himself the Cremator, played by Todoroki Tauya. That and to catch up so she could read the doujinshis the fans made of the Cremator and Secret Agent Kagami Takahiro, Takami's character. People cheered, and Izuku laughed. Takami-san is really great in that series. Anybody here who watched Windfall? Ochako raised her hand up in lightning speed, and smirked at Katsuki when he raised his hand with the same speed, but a second later, causing him to growl. If Katsuki and Ochako had one thing in common, it was the fact they both found Takami Keigo attractive. And if they had competitions over who got more merch of Takami Keigo, then that was nobody's business. The whole class had raised their hands, even the bespectacled guy and the ponytail girl who seemed unsure of Izuku. Heck, Shinsu raised his hand. Not that Ochako had anything against Shinsu. He just didn't seem the type to be watching Windfall. Takoyami's eyes sparkled. Good taste then, he murmured, in response to Kaminari, and Ochako nodded, sharing a grin with him. Fumikage-chan really likes Takami-san. I'm pretty sure he has a body pillow of Tsuyu, Takoyami hissed, embarrassed as Ochako giggled, now able to envisage Takoyami hugging a body pillow of a grinning Takami. Tsuyu just gave him a vacant stare, but her eyes were dancing with mischief. Takoyami glared at Ochako as well, but as he was blushing furiously without any heat in the action, Ochako only giggled further. Oh my god, sensei, you too? Kaminari could be heard asking, amazed. Izuku chuckled. Well, I'm more interested in finding out who the Cremator is, but yeah, Takami-san is really cool. Kaminari whooped, making Izuku laugh, and Ochako grinned. It was easy to like Kaminari. Now that's done with. Next up is 𝐬𝐡𝐢𝐬 𝐍𝐴. A pretty brown-haired girl with a perky smile walked up to the desk. Before reading out what she had to say, 𝐴𝐡𝐢𝐬 blinked, before realizing she forgot for a second what 𝐬𝐡𝐢𝐬 had looked like. She didn't even remember having seen 𝐬𝐡𝐢𝐬. But she did hear her voice back before Izuku had arrived. Huh. I love stargazing. I'd love to go to astronomy sometime, but mostly just for the telescopes, 𝐬𝐡𝐢𝐬 said with a smile, and Izuku grinned. Stargazing is great, 𝐬𝐡𝐢𝐬-san. 𝐬𝐡𝐢𝐬 blushed at the praise, and 𝐴𝐡𝐢𝐬 smirked behind her fist. Oh, so Izuku had managed to charm over a student already, eh? This was swell. Up next, 𝐴𝐡𝐢𝐬 𝐵𝑖𝑛. Another perky girl with curly pink hair so bright that 𝐴𝐡𝐢𝐬 had to do a double take before seeing it properly, walked up to the desk, smiling prettily at Izuku, making 𝐴𝐡𝐢𝐬 giggle. Izuku was good-looking, nothing like the plain teenager that had babysat 𝐴𝐡𝐢𝐬 and Katsuki. For one, he was really built. Built, 𝐴𝐡𝐢𝐬 says. And the freckles didn't hurt either. Plus, the buzzed-off hair at the back was actually super hot. 𝐴𝐡𝐢𝐬's being completely objective, of course. Objective. Objective. Yep. She was objective. Now if only Izuku would believe that he was attractive. The dummy. 𝐴𝐡𝐢𝐬 was going to have so much fun this year, she thought with a grin as 𝐴𝐡𝐢𝐬 read off what she wrote. I'm not that great at swatting, to be honest. 𝐴𝐡𝐢𝐬 blushed before brightening up with a smile once more. But I love dancing. Izuku gave her an encouraging grin, and 𝐴𝐡𝐢𝐬 giggled when 𝐴𝐡𝐢𝐬 blushed. I wouldn't say studies don't matter, 𝐴𝐡𝐢𝐬-san, but give it your all. That's more than enough and more than what anyone can ask from you. You don't have to feel weird because of it. Plus, I've always had 2 left feet myself. People laughed and 𝐴𝐡𝐢𝐬 snorted. Didn't they know it? And I gotta say, anybody who loves dancing is definitely out of this world. 𝐴𝐡𝐢𝐬's face was red, even as she kept smiling. Oh, thank you, Midoriya-sensei. Izuku gave her a thumbs up before calling on the next person. Next up, Kirishima Ijiru-kun. A guy with spiky red hair and a friendly grin walked up to the table, before reading out what he said. Hi everybody, 𝐴𝐡𝐢𝐬 liked him instantly. I wanted to be a hero when I was a kid, and my favorite manga is All Might's Legendary Adventures in Heroism. Izuku's eyes lit up as he burst out. Wow, that's my favorite manga, too. Kirishima widened his eyes, and his grin was instantly happier as Izuku raised his hand for a high five, returning it cheerily. Favorite hero? Izuku asked, grin bright. It's Crimson Riot, Midoriya-sensei. Izuku's eyes practically shone. Cool. The retro heroes are the best, to be honest, and Crimson Riot's arc was by far the best. Kirishima nodded enthusiastically, his eyes shining as well. My favorite is All Might, of course. He chuckled sheepishly. Kirishima looked a lot happier than expected. Sensei, that's so cool. Oh god. Nerds. Katsuki muttered, and 𝐴𝐡𝐢𝐬 chucked a paper airplane at him, causing Kaminari and Ishido to snicker. Katsuki glared at her, and 𝐴𝐡𝐢𝐬 blew a raspberry at him. Kirishima had now returned to his seat, and Izuku was now looking at the name on the next paper. Next up, Zero Hanta-kun. A black-haired boy with an easy grin walked up, before reading out what he wrote. My favorite superhero is Spider-Man. Oh, and I think that duct tapes are underrated. Zero said, grinning. Duct tapes are underrated. Wait till you kids get to college, there'll be a ton of stuff you'll need to tape up. Izuku said wisely, cracking a laugh or two from people. 𝐴𝐡𝐢𝐬 herself laughed. And Spider-Man? Zero-kun, I recognize taste when I see it, Izuku continued, making Zero grin wider. Thanks, teach. Izuku then took the next paper. Ida Tenya-kun, you're up next, he said, smiling. The bespectacled guy walked up to the paper, nodding stiffly before reading out what he wrote. My hero is my brother, Ida said, a little too stiffly perhaps, but the sincerity in his eyes was difficult to ignore. Oh, I'm sure he'd be happy to hear that, Izuku said, smiling softly. Ida looked awkward, but then nodded and bowed. Thank you, Midoriya-sensei. Izuku looked confused, before raising his hands and smiling nervously. Ida-kun, we don't do that here. It's okay. Be as informal as you can, okay? Ida looked skeptical, before finally smiling slightly and sitting. Izuku sighed with a smile, but he looked like he was having fun. Next up, Yaoyorozu Momo-sen. A tall girl, the one 𝐴𝐡𝐢𝐬 had seen earlier, the one with the ponytail, walked gracefully up to the table before bowing as a greeting, and then reading what she had written. My favorite book has to be the Britannica Encyclopedia. Yaoyorozu said, flushing a little. Yaoyorozu needn't have feared about looking nerdy, however. Considering how much of a nerd Izuku was, Ochako thought dryly. Izuku's eyes practically sparkled. Oh, my favorite section has to be the one on polymers. Yours, Yaoyorozu-san. Yaoyorozu looked startled, clearly not having expected any interest on that front. The section on the chemistry of oxygen, Midoriya-sensei. Izuku gave her a cheery smile. Never feel awkward for feeling smart, Yaoyorozu-san. Do you have an actual copy of the encyclopedia? I mean, I have an online version, but I've always wanted to, have the original copy. That is, if you don't mind. He blushed, looking awkward as well. Yaoyorozu's face, however, lit up with an amused smile. Yes, I do, Midoriya-sensei. I'd be happy to lend it to you. Izuku looked like he wanted to cry out of joy. Ochako snorted. Nerd. Yaoyorozu walked back with significantly more bounce in her step, and Izuku looked pleased before clearing his throat and reading out the next name. Next up, Shoji Mizu-kun. A tall, hulking guy that had Ochako gawking, walked up to the desk. Izuku looked clearly intimidated as well, but then relaxed at hearing the mellow voice from the boy. I like having a little sister. My favorite band is chemistry. Shoji said quietly. A man of culture. Takoyami muttered thoughtfully, making Tsuyu snort and Ochako smile. Izuku laughed nervously. I only know their song period, Shoji-kun. But I have to admit, they're pretty good. Shoji looked contemplative. Midoriya-sensei, I only knew them after watching Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Izuku looked infinitely relieved. Oh wow, same. Though I didn't really have the time to catch up, he said shyly, chuckling in embarrassment. They have a Spotify account, sensei. Shoji said, almost uncertainly. Izuku widened his eyes. Oh wow, that makes everything easier. Thank you, Shoji-kun, he said, smiling gratefully. Shoji smiled slightly. You're welcome, Midoriya-sensei. Izuku definitely looked like he was having a good time. His cheeks were flushed in pleasure. Next up, Ojiro Mishirao-kun. Ojiro walked up uncertainly, and read out what he wrote just as uncertainly. I like karate, he said, shrugging. Oh, what belt? Izuku asked, curious. Black. Ojiro said, now looking a bit prouder. That's cool, Ojiro-kun, Izuku said, making Ojiro smile. Meanwhile, Katsuki, who thought of himself as the only karate master in the whole of Japan, bristled in his seat, making Ochako snort. Next up, Aoyama Yuuga-kun. A very flashy blonde with a knowing smile. Why did he smile like that? Ochako wondered, sauntered up to the desk, before reading out what he wrote. I believe that a fashionable world is a better world, Aoyama proclaimed, before bowing. Izuku stared, not exactly sure what to say to that, making Ochako giggle. Izuku, to his credit however, pondered a little on what to say, before speaking. Good to see that you're proud of who you are, Aoyama-kun. And maybe we should pay attention to our wardrobes, in that case. Izuku said slowly, but his words had the desired effect regardless, and Aoyama brightened, before skipping back to his desk. Izuku shook his head with a smile. Next, Kutakuji-kun. A tall boy, timid and meek, walked up to the desk. Izuku then blinked, before signing something away in JSL, causing Ochako to blink with surprise. Izuku had learned JSL back when he had been in high school, and had tried teaching it to her and Katsuki as a way of passing the time. It's okay, do you not want to talk? Izuku signed. I don't have to, Kuta signed back, eyes wide. Of course not. I read over your file, and you don't have to worry about getting pressurized. I'll read your page then, Izuku signed, smiling. Kuta smiled brightly, nodding eagerly. Alright, everyone, since Kuta-kun needs to sign, and I'm not sure how many of you know JSL, I'll read out what he has to say. It's only for the time being. He'll come up with a text-to-speech device later. Izuku explained, before flipping the paper. He then smiled widely. Kuta-kun's favorite Disney princesses are Snow White and Sleeping Beauty, because they take care of animals. He then signed something to Kuta, who nodded enthusiastically. Ochako was sure her heart was melting. How precious. He also really loves animals. Let's take care of Kuta-kun, everyone, Izuku joked, smiling. And Izuku clearly agreed that Kuta was precious. As he should. Next up, Satoru-kun, Izuku called, and a large, rather intimidatingly hulking boy walked up, before reading out what he wrote. I like baking. The boy admitted, looking around a tad nervously. Ah. Oh, that's really amazing, Satoru-kun. Satu seemed hesitant and disbelieving, but those emotions melted off as soon as he saw the genuine cheer in his teacher's face, and thereby smiled. 𝐻𝐻𝐬𝐬 𝐍𝐵𝐭 you're next. 𝐻𝐻𝐬𝐬 swallowed, clearly a bit nervous. 𝐻𝐻𝐬 pat his back tentatively, startling him. But as soon as he saw the encouraging smile on her face, he relaxed, and Tsuyu pat his arm, making him blush. Right. 𝐻𝐻𝐬𝐬 muttered, before walking up to the desk and reading out what he wrote. I like poetry, and the darkness. 𝐻𝐻𝐬𝐬 muttered, rubbing the back of his neck and looking increasingly awkward. 𝐻𝐻𝐬 and Tsuyu exchanged a smile as Izuku encouraged 𝐻𝐻𝐬𝐬 with something or the other a little too excitedly. Not that either heard. Next up, Asui Tsuyu-san. Tsuyu looked at 𝐻𝐻𝐬 and 𝐻𝐻𝐬𝐬. The former gave her a cheery thumbs up, while the latter smiled slightly, before going up to the desk and reading what she wrote. 𝐻𝐻𝐬 heaved in a deep breath, nodding at Katsuki's questioning look, before straightening up at the sound of her name. Uraraka 𝐻𝐻𝐬-san, you're next, Izuku called out, and 𝐻𝐻𝐬 walked up, feeling nervous. Calm down, you're just gonna tell people what you like. Nothing to be nervous about. With this in mind, 𝐻𝐻𝐬 walked up and received Izuku's paper, heart warming at the encouragingly soft smile on his face. She read out what she wrote, and blushed when she heard Izuku chuckling from behind her. I've no doubt you'll do it, Uraraka-san, Izuku said, giving her a thumbs up. 𝐻𝐻𝐬's face reddened even more, but she smiled and bowed. Thank you, Midoriya-sensei. When 𝐻𝐻𝐬𝐬 pat her back and Tsuyu smiled at her, 𝐻𝐻𝐬 finally felt not so awkward anymore, and that was how Uraraka 𝐻𝐻𝐬's year in WANA started. Katsuki's year in WANA was insane. His physics teacher was his neighbor. His homeroom teacher was his 𝐓𝐡𝐬𝐭 babysitter, and he had to breathe in relief at the fact that none of his other teachers were people he knew. Unfortunately for him, he was going to be intimately acquainted with one of them, namely one Todoroki 𝐬𝐴. To think the man would end up marrying Izuku. Todoroki 𝐬𝐴 was their Japanese teacher, and he looked like he had a giant stick up his ass. He was pretty young, Izuku's age, if Katsuki bothered guessing. But he was fair, Katsuki thought approvingly. Kinda like Mr. Caterpillar, their physics teacher. But infinitely more involved in the class, that was for sure. The girls, save for, of course, Uraraka and her weird frog friend, drooled over their Japanese teacher later. For the rest of their time in the school, in fact. Gross. Though, Katsuki did get that Mr. Half and Half was hot. He was bisexual. Of course he knew a pretty face when he saw one, and damn him to hell and back if that guy wasn't pretty. And if his brain dared think about the time he had stared a little too long at Izuku punch a punching bag, he was going to dunk it in nitroglycerin. So, Katsuki's initial thought of death. It sure was on the way, swift as a 𝐓𝐡𝐬𝐭 river. He did die in lunchtime. Because of shitty hair, damn it. If only the universe had warned him that Izuku had done this to get into his 𝐓𝐡𝐭 head. 𝐓𝐡𝐭. He was gonna have to call Izuku of all the people Midoriya-sensei. 𝐓𝐡𝐭. 𝐓𝐡 No way. At best, Izuku was gonna be Nerd Sensei, because damn if the guy wasn't a religious academic. And that was 𝐓𝐡𝐭 that. Shitty hair somehow decided it was okay to sit next to Katsuki. And Katsuki decides it's okay to not pay any attention because 𝐓𝐡𝐭 if he was socializing like a loser. Hey, dude, I'm Kirishima. Shitty hair, in fact, did not get the memo. Katsuki growled under his breath. Whoa, dude, chill, the guy laughs. Obnoxiously. Like somehow, he is genuinely happy. 24 𝐓𝐡𝐭 7. Wow. You're Bakugo, right? Katsuki sighed. Shitty hair was 𝐓𝐡𝐭 relentless, wasn't he? Yeah. What's it to you, shitty hair? Katsuki asked roughly, looking at the other blandly. Shitty hair blinks before gawking. Shitty hair. We both have spiky hair, man. Your hair is shitty, hence shitty hair. That much should be obvious. Katsuki says decidedly, glaring at him. Shitty hair then laughs. I can tell we're gonna be buddies, dude. Really now? Katsuki drawls. He does suppose shitty hair is decent for not asking him about how he knows Izuku. Somehow, 5 losers think it's okay to call in their buddy after that. 𝐓𝐡𝐭 losers. At home, though, Katsuki glares at his parents, who are trying their hardest not to laugh. You all 𝐓𝐡𝐭 knew. Katsuki says blankly, and his mother finally loses it, guffawing. Of course we did. His mother guffaws out, positively cackling. His dad grins. Izuku-kun asked us to keep it a secret. He wanted to see how you'd react. He also doesn't mind if the school knows the staff already knows anyway. he explained, chuckling. That nerd is dead. Katsuki mutters, and his mom smirks. Kid, he agreed to put a 0 on your history tests or work on your record with the words poor discipline if you're acting out. His mom drawls, a shit-eating smirk on her face. Katsuki freezes, dreams of a perfect record shattering into broken glass before his eyes at those terrible, terrible words. Shit. I think we broke him. His mom crows, and Katsuki growls before stalking off to his room. When he sees Izuku wave cheerily at him from his window to Katsuki's window, Katsuki may or may not have snapped a pencil out of sheer combustive rage. Or horror. Whatever. He then texts Uraraka about this whole shitty thing because FCK him if he was gonna wallow in this alone. Uraraka was going down with him. U7. 29 literally WTF happened imps not even sure anymore Uraraka. 7. 30 that's a first lol you. 7. 30 hey you can't deny that wasn't 𝐓𝐶𝐭 weird as hell Uraraka. 7. 31. True that I didn't think Izuku would ever be a homeroom teacher. The weird thing was he was pretty cool, like really cool you. 7. 32 yeah I get that Uraraka. 7. 32 𝐴𝐵. 7. 32. No wonder people started laughing themselves shitless at dinner last night Uraraka. 7. 32 no kidding like you. 7. 33 at least it's only Caterpillar Sensei and the nerd Uraraka. 7. 33 lol true. Also Todoroki Sensei seems familiar for some reason. U. 7. 34. Now why the FCK is half and half Sensei familiar Uraraka. 7. 34 ID. If I did know I wouldn't be guessing. Dummy you. 7. 34 who in the living hell are you calling a dummy besides why the FCK would he owe my 𝐓𝐶𝐭 god? Uraraka. 7. 34. What is it you? 7. 35. Now. Mind you, I don't believe it myself, but he kinda looks like the 𝐓𝐶𝐭 cremator from Windfall Uraraka. 7. 35 wow that was quick guess, those Photoshop journeys of trying to unmask the cremator was talented of you lol you. 7. 35 FCKU. Think about it, they have the same eyes, that's what you found familiar. And to think that I even legit lost my shit, thinking he was another one of our neighbors Uraraka. 7. 35 ha 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 ha, though it would be weird yeah off you. 7. 35 wait a 𝐓𝐶𝐭 minute, isn't the actor's name Todoroki Tauya Uraraka? 7. 35 I wouldn't think too much about it Todoroki is a pretty common surname. Yeah dummy and so maybe they have the same eyes or whatever Todoroki Sensei's got only one blue eye the other is brown gray something. IDQ. 7. 35 you know what that's actually legit. But don't you dare crow at me FCK off got books to beat the shit out of Uraraka. 7. 36 nerd. Izuku is a very effective teacher. Katsuki supposes he shouldn't be surprised kids had been clinging on to Izuku since the guy was in high school. But Katsuki has to admit that Izuku is 𝐓𝐶𝐭. Amazing as a teacher. Somehow, he managed to transform the Heian period into the first 3 episodes of Star Wars. And somehow, not a single person, not even Pikachu, got less than a 90% in their history tests. That, Katsuki thinks, is 𝐓𝐶𝐭 talent. Somehow, Katsuki gets himself a squad. The Baka squad, Raccoon Eyes calls it. There's Pikachu, shitty hair, duct tape, because he always had a 𝐓𝐶𝐭 duct tape with him for some weird-ass reason. Eyebags he was only there so he could 𝐓𝐶𝐭 stare at Pikachu all day long. Not that Katsuki was judging, and Raccoon Eyes. They're tolerable, Katsuki supposes. Uraraka herself has Poetry Dude, Frog Girl, and their newest additions Tall Mask, and Glasses. Tall Mask was acquired via a lame as hell common interest in the chemistry band along with Poetry Dude. And Glasses was apparently impressed with Uraraka for some reason, or the other something about admiring how she wanted to do something to help her parents first. FCK if Katsuki knows. It's called the Raka Squad, or so Raccoon Eyes likes to call it anyway. 𝐓𝐶𝐭 lame. Of course, he has to tell the extras following him that Izuku is in fact his neighbor. But he only gets the words halfway out on lunchtime, a few weeks after the first week, and then it's complete pandemonium. Oh my god, can you find out what test he's conducting? Dude, he makes sure everybody 𝐓𝐶𝐭 passes. What the actual FCK is your problem, Pikachu? Can you warn us if he's deciding to set up group projects or something? Even if I do warn you, there's nothing you can 𝐓𝐶𝐭 do about it, eyebags. Oh boy. Does Midoriya Sensei lift or something? Katsuki glares at Raccoon Eyes, who's waggling her eyebrows. He practices boxing in his free time. Katsuki grumbles. Raccoon Eyes swoons, and Katsuki rolls his eyes. Dude, Midoriya-sensei is totally a comic book nerd, right? And you better 𝐓𝐶𝐭 know it. Shitty hair crows in delight. So manly. Katsuki stares at him. Has Midoriya-sensei ever gotten pissed? I honestly have no 𝐓𝐶𝐭 intention of telling you. Duct tape. When Ochako tells her friends that she's Izuku's neighbor, and therefore got babysat by him practically her entire life. Well, that explains why Midoriya-sensei looks close to dying of laughter every time he looks at you and Bakugo-chan. Tsuyu deadpans, making Ochako squawk. That obvious, huh? Ochako manages, grinning weakly. It is true that Midoriya-sensei sees you much more fondly. It is understandable, I suppose. Ida says, looking thoughtful. Takoyami nods, stroking his chin. True. Xiaoji shrugs. It's none of our business either way. We all know that Midoriya-sensei is definitely not the kind to show favoritism, too. Ochako smiles, happy that she got such good friends. The 𝐓𝐶𝐭 cherry on the 𝐓𝐶𝐭 top arrives when one fine morning, Izuku runs faster than normal, clearly aggravated. Oi, nerd sensei, 𝐓𝐶𝐭 hell, Katsuki yells, before exchanging a suspicious look with Uraraka, who shrugs, looking concerned. Izuku stops at the usual tree, before panting and punching said tree with an angry grunt. Katsuki stops and stares at his neighbor, now sharing an alarmed look with Uraraka. They've only seen Izuku this pissed in the following scenarios. Bullies. They don't live to see the 𝐓𝐶𝐭 light of day, when encountered by Midoriya-goddamned Izuku. Where there is injustice, there is a pissed as 𝐓𝐶𝐭 Izuku. You. Okay, Deku-kun? Uraraka asks, approaching him hesitantly. Izuku sighs and smiles at the two of them. That dumb as 𝐓𝐶𝐭, I'm okay? Smile that Katsuki hates so 𝐓𝐶𝐭 much. Ah, sorry, Kakin, Ochakin. I shouldn't have let you two notice. Katsuki shrugs. I've seen you with the most atrocious haircut in the history of dumbass 𝐓𝐶𝐭 haircuts. You can tell me what it is, I'm not asking you as a student. Uraraka nods in agreement. Yeah, we don't mind what it is, and if you can't tell us, that's fine too, Deku-kun. Nah, just some annoying people. People who don't have basic common sense. Izuku murmurs, waving a hand and gritting his jaw, causing both Uraraka and Katsuki to flinch, exchanging a grimace while they were at it. Woe betide the idiot that pissed off Izuku. Mind being a little more clear? Katsuki asks, raising an eyebrow. Izuku snorts. Well, there's this annoying person I met recently. And they just annoyed me a little too much. Nothing big. He adds, smiling at them reassuringly. Katsuki winces, and Uraraka blinks. His brain does a quick vibe check. 𝐓𝐶𝐭 Pikachu. List of things that annoy Midoriya Izuku update. Bullies. Injustice. Apparently annoying idiots. Uraraka shakes her head. Deku-kun, whoever they are, you don't have to be grumpy because of them, you know? She says worriedly. Katsuki nods with a grunt before adding his 2 cents. No point in wasting brain cells on someone so stupid. You going for another run or not, nerd? He says, with a shrug. Izuku smiles wryly, green eyes dancing with amusement, as if he knows a joke Katsuki doesn't, and it's annoying as 𝐓𝐶𝐭. He then shrugs as well, grinning. Alright, last one to the house gets to do a lot more studying tonight. Deal? Uraraka grins in challenge. We'll take you up on that. Katsuki grins wildly, wiping his chin. You're on, old man. I'm only 9 years older, Kakin. Izuku deadpans, looking as if he's suffering, causing Uraraka to giggle. Izuku's been looking like he's suffering for what, 3 years or so. Until then he was an annoying-ass sunshine guy who could never be spotted not smiling for some 𝐓𝐶𝐭 reason. Katsuki supposes adult life's caught up to the guy. He sure as 𝐓𝐶𝐭 will beat the shit out of adult life if it tries catching up to him. You're out of college. That means you're a 𝐓𝐶𝐭 old man. So shut up and jog already. Do you want detention? Izuku drawls, and Katsuki freezes, making Uraraka snort beside him. He then glares at her before scowling. 𝐓𝐶𝐭, he forgot Izuku was his teacher half a second there. And the 𝐓𝐶𝐭 is laughing. 𝐓𝐶𝐭. Katsuki says, eyes wide. Izuku laughs. It's nice to put you on your toes. He says mischievously, patting Katsuki before taking off. Hey. Swat hard, donkey, Uraraka says with a cackle, patting his back before shooting off. 𝐓𝐶𝐭. Katsuki's not blind. There's a tense moment when Izuku walks up to the class the next day and waits for Mr. Half and Half to finish teaching. Izuku clears his throat, and people look at each other awkwardly, even as the Japanese teacher kept scribbling away on the board. Katsuki actually raises his eyebrows when Izuku clears his throat again another time. He's pissed clearly, if the way he's narrowed his eyes is any indication. And then 𝐓𝐡𝐤 hits him like Darth Vader chopping off Luke's hand. And it must hit Uraraka too, because he can feel her gape at him. And Katsuki nods furiously at her. Their Japanese teacher was the one who pissed off Izuku yesterday, for what Katsuki has no absolutely 𝐓𝐡𝐤 idea. But his face heats up when he realizes what he inadvertently called his Japanese teacher, and he gulps. Shit. He was screwed by the 𝐓𝐡𝐤 bearers of karma above. Oh shit, shit was about to get real in here, Katsuki thinks with wide eyes as the silence in the classroom tenses. Todoroki-sensei, Izuku asks in the blandest voice Katsuki's ever heard him use. It would have been funny if Izuku didn't look so pissed. Nevertheless, Katsuki snaps a photo of it anyway. Their Japanese teacher has some 𝐓𝐡𝐤 nerve as it turns out. Much to Katsuki's amazement, the man deliberately drags the chalk down at the last stroke of kanji to make sure it releases a horribly high-pitched sound, causing Izuku to cringe, and then walks to the dustbin, before chucking it in there gracefully. It's the last piece of chalk in the classroom, and Izuku rarely brings his own chalk to the classroom. The man clearly must know this, if the way he stares at Izuku is any indication. The man also gives Izuku such a piercing look that Katsuki bets would have screwed anyone sane enough over 100 times to cause them to piss. Izuku, however, is not 𝐓𝐡𝐤 sane in any sense, and he just shoots the teacher the blandest look in the history of unimpressed looks. Katsuki hears Pikachu whistle and mutter damn. 𝐓𝐡𝐤 damn indeed. I think it's my class right now. Izuku says quietly, eyes narrowed. Let it never be said Izuku never backed down from a fight. That's how Katsuki knows he's legit. Apologies, I hadn't noticed you standing there. Mr. 𝐓𝐴 says, smoothly. Whoa boy, this guy just got himself on Izuku's shit list. Katsuki can't help but think with a hinged jaw. Izuku gives him a disbelieving look. The one that says, are you 𝐓𝐡𝐤 shitting me? How can you be so 𝐓𝐡𝐤 pretentious? And suddenly it is so 𝐓𝐡𝐤 funny that Katsuki has to gasp for breath into his hand, because he wants to laugh so badly but can't. Izuku is not above giving him detention despite the friendly guy attitude. Katsuki learned that the hard way when he got detention for talking back in class. He can't blame Izuku for that one, annoyingly enough. Ah, I see. Izuku says faintly, blinking as Mr. 𝐓𝐴 strides past him gracefully in a way that reminds Katsuki of that one guy in the Bleach anime. The one with the 𝐓𝐡𝐤 ass cherry blossoms, and Katsuki is 𝐓𝐡𝐤 shook. He really shouldn't spend so much time on Twitter, just because Pikachu told him to. 𝐓𝐡𝐤 is Mr. 𝐓𝐴 really shitting on Izuku because the guy gave him advice. Wow, wow. Uraraka looks surprised out of her skin too. He can't blame her. Izuku literally inhales, as if Mr. 𝐓𝐴's snooty attitude drained his 𝐓𝐡𝐤 soul away, and Katsuki really wants to laugh. The history teacher then gives everyone a blank and dry stare. Nobody test me today. I've had too much in the span of 48 hours. Izuku says, looking remarkably like Mr. Caterpillar, their physics teacher. The resemblance is 𝐓𝐡𝐤 uncanny and surreal. Katsuki stops grinning and swallows. Izuku genuinely looks pissed off. It's evident in the way he's tightly gripping onto the table. 𝐓𝐡𝐤. Uraraka looks concerned and nervous in a way that disgusts all the determination out of Katsuki's system. Are you all right, Midoriya-sensei? Izuku's face softens. He really likes Uraraka. In a non-weird way. Ah, that's okay, Uraraka-san. I'm just tired, he says, smiling. He then reverts back to the deadpan look. But seriously though, I expect you to make this class easier for me to teach. Not that you guys don't make it easy already. I'd rather appreciate it if you kept the chatter to a minimum, okay? People look nervous. Izuku really is exuding caterpillar energy, and Katsuki has to give his hat off to Mr. 𝐓𝐴. Izuku is annoyed with Todoroki Shoto and himself. Todoroki was an okay guy, too pretty. Izuku's traitorous gay brain thinks as well most of the time. But the thing was this. Not to imitate Katsuki, but Todoroki had a shitty dad. A dad who thought Todoroki wasn't supposed to become a teacher, if the way that unfortunate phone conversation outside the staff room was any indication. So Izuku thought of just, okay, to be fair, as Mr. Shoto said, he was poking his nose into it. But he couldn't help it. God, Todoroki looked so defeated and worn. So all Izuku had said was for Todoroki not to heed what his dad said. You don't really have to listen to your dad if it's stressing you out that much, Izuku had said innocently. Then he was doomed. When Mr. 𝐲𝗏 face-bombed, that's when Izuku knew he was 𝐓𝐡𝐢𝐬. Then Todoroki started growling at Izuku 5 seconds later to mind his own business, and whoa, nothing Izuku did warranted that much hostility. And pettiness. Did Izuku mention pettiness? He has to mention pettiness at least thrice. Especially if the chalk episode was any indication. That is when Izuku came to the ostensibly sensible conclusion that Todoroki 𝐲𝗏 probably needed to work on his attitude. That's what Izuku has fixed in his mind. Until the bell rings and the setting sun glows and fades out of view on the horizon, signifying that it is time for everyone to go home. His ears are still ringing from the way the chalk got dragged around on the board by the prick. Yes, the guy is a prick. Or so was his opinion until this happened. Izuku is the last to leave, but apparently not. Because standing there at the doorstep, looking increasingly awkward, is Todoroki 𝐲𝗏. The history teacher stares at the other man for a period of time that is entirely not appropriate, and he sighs, running a crooked hand through messy green curls. Todoroki-sensei, Izuku asks flatly, staring the other man in the eye. Todoroki looks sheepish and very embarrassed. It's not fair of him to be so cute when he's looking contrite. And wow, Izuku really needs to see if there's brain bleach, or if it's just an internet myth. The Japanese teacher sighs, looking awkward. Midoriya, I'd like to apologize. Todoroki says frankly, looking Izuku in the eye. Ah, so Todoroki wasn't addressing him as a fellow colleague then. No honorific? So he just speaks that way. Whoa. Izuku purses his lips, not quite trusting himself to say anything for 5 seconds before nodding stiffly, and then sighing. He saves the other man the hassle of getting embarrassed by smiling slightly. That's okay, I shouldn't have interfered. Or poked my nose into your personal affairs. Izuku tries, smiling wider. Todoroki swallows. No, you shouldn't have. But you were at least trying to offer me concrete advice. Advice I should have realized when I started this job. He says wryly, the hints of a smile dancing into existence on his face. Izuku cringes, looking apologetic. The other man is nothing if not terribly blunt. And achingly honest. This wasn't what he expected, and now he's feeling a little bad for having judged Todoroki too harshly. Ah, I'm really sorry, and I accept yours too. You forgave me way too easily for someone who just got on the bad end of someone's anger in front of their students. Todoroki says dryly, and Izuku barks out a small laugh unexpectedly. Well, no use dwelling on it, right? Izuku says, smile now more genuine. The sun highlights the sharp lines of Todoroki's admittedly well-defined cheekbones, as he stares at Izuku in utter bewilderment. Izuku grins, chuckling. I don't really hold grudges, Todoroki-kun. It's not a problem. Would you like to start over? Izuku tries, attempting to make his smile friendly as he outstretches a hand. It works because Todoroki shakes his head with a wry smile before shaking Izuku's hand. That would be fine. Perhaps I should explain to you why I was so angered. I owe you that much, really. Izuku flails his hands around in surprise, shaking his head wildly. Ah, no, not really, Todoroki-kun, you don't have to. Todoroki's smile is still wry. I owe you for forgiving my admittedly petty behavior that easily. Listen to me, won't you? Izuku sighs, but he smiles as well. Fine, I guess you do owe me. Todoroki then looks up at the clock, grimacing. I suppose you have to go back, Izuku chuckles. Not really. I live alone. Do you have to go back? He then asks, looking concerned. Todoroki shakes his head. No. Then you wouldn't mind if I explained, Izuku laughs. Nope. You're insistent on it, and I suppose you would feel better talking about it, so why not? He asks, shrugging. Todoroki gives him a strange look, half frightening Izuku into the thought train that he might have offended the man again for some strange reason or the other, before shaking his head and sitting on his table. Izuku hides a smile as he sits on his chair, at the rather childish way Todoroki's swinging his legs. Izuku decides that this rather peculiar train of thought is dangerous, so he puts his brain to rest and his ears to work. My shitty old man has a large company, and he wants me to take over it, but I said screw it because I really want to be a writer. Todoroki admits, eyes far away as he clumps his hands together on his lap with a sigh. That's good for you, isn't it? Izuku blurts out, but thankfully Todoroki chuckles. Thank you. But he doesn't agree. That would be because my older siblings flat out refused, and now he's stuck for a legitimate heir, I suppose. I can see what he thinks. He worked hard to build that company, but none of us are interested. And it must be pretty galling for him. I ran away from home and thought, hey, maybe I'll be a teacher to get some money before I start going ahead to a publishing company. So I took liberal, and he's disapproved ever since. The end. Todoroki clarifies, a wry note at the end. Izuku smiles sadly. But it's your life in the end, isn't it? So why let him affect you so? He asks gently, genuinely confused at why Todoroki's clearly so conflicted. Todoroki swallows, breath hitching as his eyes widen slightly. Izuku is going to go on a limb and say that for someone clearly so analytical and smart, Todoroki hadn't considered this line of thought for some reason. Of course, not out loud, but you get the picture. I guess. Todoroki says finally, looking a little dazed. Izuku decides he should keep talking so as to stop Todoroki from getting too spooked. The poor man's probably come to an epiphany of some sort, and he'd be mortified if it turned out he was just staring at blank space. So, valiantly, Izuku decides to keep talking. I mean, I became a teacher for the money too. That, and I really think history's cool. I actually want to be a comic book writer. Geeky. I know, it's not geeky. I think it's cool. Todoroki says in a small voice, fixing Izuku with an intense stare. Izuku chuckles nervously. No one can be possibly expected to keep their cool at the end of that look. But somehow or the other, Izuku managed. Thank you. You were saying? Todoroki says, now looking more interested. I'm sorry for rambling even though you, Todoroki raises an eyebrow. Seriously? Are you going to apologize for that? You want me to finish? Izuku squeaks out. He's honestly surprised. I was just about to get to know a rather decent colleague. Pardon me if I'm interested. Todoroki says wryly. Izuku manages to smile. Todoroki's a brat, but FCK if it isn't endearing. Oops, he should spend more time doing non-Bakugo family-related things otherwise if he's not careful. He might end up swearing for the rest of his life. He clears his throat before speaking. Well, I was about to say that I want to be a comic book writer, but my mom wanted me to have a backup plan. So here I am. That's nice. So, I'm guessing you want to do some medieval history-esque comic or something? Todoroki asks, now fairly curious. Izuku laughs. Nah. Something like Marvel, Star Wars or DC, but hopefully less convoluted and more coherent, if you get my drift. But definitely something with heroes. He admits bashfully, rubbing the back of his neck. He then bites on his lip. Actually, All Might's legendary adventures and heroism is my inspiration, really. You know, the one from Yagi-sensei. Todoroki's eyes sparkle with interest. I have to admit, I'm a fan. I've loved his comics since I was a kid. He says, smiling. Izuku widens his eyes. No way, seriously? Todoroki nods. Yeah, I really like All Might. He's kind of my favorite. He admits, tilting his head to the side as he rests his palms behind him. Izuku's pretty sure his inner fanboy is squealing. He's pretty sure his jaw is unhinged like an idiot. He's also pretty sure he looks like an idiot in front of Todoroki. But for some reason, the other man is just smiling slightly. You like All Might? Izuku can only manage, grinning idiotically. Yeah, he's cool. I'm kind of iffy about Nightai. Dude, he is so amazing. How can you be iffy about Nightai? He's so cool, Izuku wails, completely foregoing any and all pretenses of dignity. Todoroki stares at him before chuckling into his hand, leaving a silence as Izuku stares at him before hiding his face behind his hands. Went off the rails there, didn't I? Izuku asked, voice muffled. Not really, Midoriya. Don't worry. Todoroki says, but his voice is shaking with amusement. Izuku pouts, hands at the side again, and Todoroki actually laughs. Okay, fine, so maybe Nightai isn't that bad. Not as bad as, say, Gran Torino. Todoroki acquiesces, raising his hands up in surrender, chuckling slightly. Okay, so maybe Gran Torino was unfair towards Dust Avenger. Izuku says, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. See? Todoroki says with a chuckle. Izuku absently decides he likes hearing it, even as the younger continues speaking. All Might aside, your ambitions are definitely admirable. Izuku chokes at that, but Todoroki goes on, not having noticed. So, hopefully, no cloning, Izuku shudders, but smiles at the other man's admittedly good attempt at humor. No cloning. Izuku agrees. There were enough clones to create identity dysphoria, and Izuku sure as 𝐹𝐶𝐾 had ideas about creating identity dysphoria without clones. Clones were so overrated, honestly. Todoroki smiles. You'll be a good comic writer then. Izuku chuckles, bashful and unable to believe he had just thought of this wonderful guy as a prick only minutes before. Thank you. What would you like to write, if you don't mind me asking, Todoroki-kun? Todoroki's cheeks flush. Well, I'm more of one of those pretentious writers, honestly. I'd love to write stories based on familial relationships, if you get what I mean, he explains, getting down from his seat on the table. Izuku smiles. He definitely gets what Todoroki means, and considering what the other man just spoke of, it's not a surprise to him. It sounds beautiful, if he's being honest. First off, that's not pretentious in any sense of the word at all. The world could definitely use more of that than heroes, Todoroki-kun. It's really sweet. Todoroki's cheeks flush further. Now you're just being polite. Izuku laughs, waving his hands around. No, I'm not, Todoroki-kun. Yes, you are. Todoroki says huffily, but his mismatched eyes are shining with amusement and genuine pleasure. Izuku feels warm even as he rebuffs Todoroki's claims, something he hasn't felt since talking to his kid's god. He has students now. He's so old, his mom, Katsuki and Ochako, or the Yagi couple next door. He smiles widely, happy to have met Todoroki 𝐬𝐻. Did you clear it up with half and half sensei? Katsuki asks gruffly, when the three of them jog the next morning. Izuku looks at him sheepishly. I was that obvious, huh? Uraraka snorts. Come on, Deku-kun, both of you looked like you wanted to murder each other, Izuku squawks. But, he starts to protest. Katsuki snorts as he jogs further. You nerd, you practically looked like Caterpillar Sensei. Caterpillar, oh, you mean 𝐬𝐻-san? Wow, that bad, huh? Yup. So you gonna beat me to it, or do I have to leave you standing in the dust? Katsuki snarks, making Izuku raise an eyebrow. Uraraka grins, jogging on the other side of Izuku. I'm beating both of you losers, she says, before jogging up further. Izuku smirks, green eyes lighting up. Oh, believe me, kiddos, I'm not letting you beat me that easily, Izuku says cheerily, jogging faster. The class, Katsuki included, holds its breath as the bell rings at the end of Japanese class, signifying the start of history class. What was going to happen? Was the confrontation between their teachers just a one-time thing? Or did it signify the start of a fun teacher rivalry? Something for them to speculate about when they got bored out of their minds or during the exam season? Or were they just going to ignore each other altogether and waste their anticipation? Katsuki wasn't thinking of any of this, obviously, but he supposed it was what some of the more annoying people were thinking. And Uraraka? Probably. The moment of truth arrived. Izuku came in, before shooting a bright smile at Mr. Half and Half, who smiled back. Their Japanese teacher 𝐹𝐶𝐭 smiled. What? May Katsuki just ask this for himself with the actual 𝐹𝐶𝐭? Only half a day ago Izuku looked ready to commit seppuku at sensing the Japanese teacher's presence, and now suddenly he was giving him the dumbest grin in the history of dumbass grins. What? The class seemed to be on the same wavelength. They were all muttering away furiously, dubious eyes on their teacher's exchange. Izuku clapped Mr. Half and Half's shoulder, and the other man smiled slightly before leaving. So, hey guys, time for the good stuff. Izuku's eyes sparkled as he set his books on the table. People stared at each other again, this time, wondering why the 𝐹𝐶𝐭 Izuku was so excited, and what exactly good stuff meant. And exactly how he became so chummy with Mr. Half and Half, because that was definitely baffling as 𝐹𝐶𝐭. Katsuki briefly met Shitty Hair's stupidly awestruck eyes before clicking his tongue and raising his eyebrows as Izuku ran out for a second and dragged inside a mannequin, wearing a kabuki mask and kabuki clothes. The Edo period, Izuku announced, palm on the desk as he grinned around at everyone, sparkling like he was some 𝐹𝐶𝐭 cheery anime character or something. Honestly, Katsuki did not shudder at the sight of the kabuki mannequin. No 𝐹𝐶𝐭 sorry. People actually 𝐹𝐶𝐭 cheered. What the actual hell? I'm telling you, it was weird, Raccoon Eyes says, eyes wide. Katsuki nods, grunting noncommittally. Either way, Nerd Sensei's been known to forgive people easily. Let it go, Raccoon Eyes. Looking back on it, he supposes this is where he should have gotten suspicious. Katsuki thinks nothing of the suspicious glint in Raccoon Eyes' eyes when he goes for volleyball practice. Volleyball was 𝐹𝐶𝐭 amazing. Jumping up high in the air, and slamming down that annoying ass ball with everything you got. Amazing, it was. Alas, all meaningful things had come to an end when he's sipping water and Raccoon Eyes sneaks up behind him. Going all PSSST, Bakugu. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 violently chokes on his water and glares at her, while she laughs nervously and pats his back. When he's finally stopped coughing, he inhales heavily. Oh, so class 1 can see their friends at practice and we can't? Comes the voice of blonde hair 𝐓𝐶𝐬 from somewhere in the abyss, and 𝐬𝐻𝐸 grinds his teeth. Blonde hair 𝐓𝐶𝐬 was annoying, but he did set a good toss. That's all 𝐬𝐻𝐸's giving him, because he's so 𝐓𝐶 annoying. He gets ready to toss his water bottle at golden hair 𝐓𝐶𝐬. But the guy's classmate smacks the back of said guy's head. Dude, nobody said you can't see your friends at practice, Monoma. Stop being a loser. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 nods curtly at the guy before glaring at Raccoon Eyes. The 𝐓𝐶𝐭 do you want? He asks roughly. Raccoon Eyes, undeterred as 𝐓𝐶 usual, grins at him. Say, Bakugu, is Midoriya sensei gay? 𝐬𝐻𝐸 chokes once more. Why the 𝐓𝐶𝐭 would you ask me that? He hisses at Raccoon Eyes as she grins wider at him. I don't know, maybe because he looked seriously cute talking to Todoroki sensei today. She gushes and 𝐬𝐻𝐸 glares at her. Seriously, don't. Besides, it's nobody's business if nerd sensei's banging whomever. Which is really 𝐓𝐶 weird for me to talk about. So out of my sight. 𝐬𝐻𝐸 says dryly, before chugging on water again. It escalates from there. And by it, 𝐬𝐻𝐸 means the nightmare that is his life. He may or may not be entirely too dramatic, and he blames it on eye bags. I'm not being dramatic, you're just full of yourself. Why I oughta, 𝐸𝐬. Windfall blooper series no. 1. Do I really have to get on this motorbike? I mean, I'm just gonna be holding on to him awkwardly. 𝐀𝐦 gave his husband, not that the world knows it. Haha, a wry look. Talia just shrugs. Oh, 𝐀𝐦 says faintly, under the accelerated pressure from Talia's boot. Talia widens his eyes in horror, quickly retracting his boot from 𝐀𝐦's face. Cut. Talia stared at the boot mark on 𝐀𝐦's face in horror. Oi, 𝐀𝐦, 𝐀𝐦 laughed, waving a hand. Relax. It looks pretty realistic now. Talia glared at him. Realistic? My foot, what if I crushed your face bones or some shit? 𝐀𝐦 pinched Talia's cheek, causing the other to blush and swat at him, even amidst Himiko's giggling. Nice to know you care, baby. He murmurs, smirking and snickering when Talia swats for his nose. Life at Class 1A was good, Ochako decides. After 10 days of classes, Izuku had decided that they'd select the class representatives considering they did need some to, well, keep 𝐬𝐻𝐸 in line. Firstly, actually, if anything, somebody was required to keep 𝐬𝐻𝐸 from flipping a table. Hey, guys, guess what? No class today, Izuku said, grinning as he sat on the desk. Ochako sighed in relief. Nothing against history, of course, but not having classes was always good for her poor heart. What do you think it'll be, Acha-chan? Tsuyu asked, curiously, having taken to calling her that now. Ochako shrugged. I don't know, maybe some sort of activity. She sure hoped it would be an activity. Activities were always so fun after all, especially compared to listening to some boring history lesson. No offense to Izuku, but history, as well as he taught it, was boring at the end of the day. Alas, Tiwa's not an activity. We're choosing the class representatives. I'd like the ones who want to volunteer for the position to write their names on the board, and everybody else can vote for who they want, Izuku announced, drumming his calloused fingers gently on the desk. Everybody looked excited, Ochako included. Should she be class representative? Then she looked at Katsuki, who was already stalking up to the board and scribbling away his name on it, while threatening everyone to vote for him. Izuku's face terribly dubious at the side, as he watched this disaster unfold. Nah, being class representative was not worth it. First off, too much work. Secondly, less of Katsuki. She already saw enough of him as it is. At this rate, it was a miracle her earbuds were still intact. Next, she saw Yaoyorozu hesitantly write her name on the board, while Ida marched up and wrote his name, looking rather nervous. Ochako then looked at Tsuyu, Tokoyami and Shoji curiously. Do any of you guys want to be class rep? She asked, making Tokoyami shake his head vehemently. Ochako hid a smile. That was a no from Tokoyami then. Tsuyu shrugged. Yaomomo-chan seems better suited for it. It looks like the position will help her too. Ochako looked confused. How so? The other two boys looked interested too, as Tsuyu started speaking. Yaomomo-chan is used to projecting confidence, but I don't think she actually has any of that. I don't know how many of you noticed, but she was pretty nervous in admitting to something she liked. Back on our first day. Ochako blinked. Yeah, Momo, nervous? It's kinda difficult to believe, she admitted, smiling slightly. 𝐀𝐦 nodded, looking skeptical. She didn't seem nervous. That's what she's raised to show you, considering that she's from the more upper echelon of society. But if she does become class rep, I think it'll help her believe in herself more, 𝐶𝐸 said, nodding wisely. Ochako stared, in awe of the keen empathy 𝐶𝐸 possessed. So amazing, Tsu-chan. 𝐶𝐸's always been good at reading other people, Tokoyami said, a little too softly perhaps, because Ochako shot him a teasing grin, and 𝐀𝐦 shot him a knowing look in response. Tokoyami glared at both of them, but then flushed as 𝐶𝐸 chuckled. 𝐓𝐸𝗏𝗏-chan, that's nice of you to say. Ochako elbowed 𝐀𝐸 with a smirk, whose eyes crinkled in response, and Tokoyami glared at the duo once more. Anybody else want to stand for class rep? Izuku's voice called out, and after a minute of silence, Ochako turned to him to see what he would say. Okay, guys, write the name of the class reps you want. 2 class reps, remember, 2. Nobody suggests names, because you need to decide what you want, alright? Once everyone's done, I want you all to hand in your votes one by one. Ochako snorted with amusement. Leave it to Izuku to be the morality police. Okay, start. Ochako scribbled down Ida's and Yaoyorozu's names on 2 pieces of paper, before waiting. Soon enough, the sounds of pens on papers lowered to and out of existence, and she waited as her classmates handed in the votes to Izuku, who sorted them into piles. Ochako watched with amusement as one column had only 1 piece of paper, while the other 2 were overwhelmingly filled. She'd bet her money on that pile being Katsuki's, and if Izuku's clearly pointed desire not to laugh at the single lone piece of paper was any indication, she wasn't alone in that thought. I'm betting that 1 piece of paper is for Katsuki-kun, Ochako whispered to Tokoyami, who snorted. No kidding, he muttered, making her giggle. Bakugo-chan really isn't the popular type. The one thing I can give him is that he's unintentionally funny, and great at swearing. 𝐶𝐸 deadpanned, making both Tokoyami and Ochako chuckle. 𝐀𝐸 shrugged. Let's not jump to conclusions. Ochako grinned, patting 𝐀𝐸's unfairly tall shoulder. Ah, 𝐀𝐸-kun, leave it to you to be the nice guy, she said cheerily. 𝐀𝐸 shrugged again, but his cheeks were flushed. Well, 𝐀𝐸 is a good person, Tokoyami said sagely. 𝐀𝐸-chan is really sweet. 𝐶𝐸 agreed. Ochako laughed at the flustered expression on their usually unflappable friend's face. 𝐀𝐸 really needed to be praised more. Izuku then tapped on the desk with the duster. Guys, got the results. Ida-kun gets 17 votes. Yaoyorozu-san gets 17 votes as well, and Bakugo-kun gets 1 vote. There's no way in hell I got only 1 vote, nerd sensei, Katsuki roared, even as Ochako laughed herself into an early grave in the corner. Izuku closed his ears with his palms, the wind clearly taken out of his sails. You can check it if you want, he deadpanned, and Katsuki stalked up to the desk, glaring at the lone piece of paper. Done? Izuku asked tiredly, when Katsuki glared at the other 2 paper columns for more than a silent minute. Katsuki glared at him, before huffing and stalking back to his place, crossing his arms with a grumpy expression. Ochako couldn't breathe for laughing. Izuku sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose before brightening up again. So your class representatives will be Ida-kun and Yaoyorozu-san. Come up front, you two, please, he cheered, waving his hand in a come here gesture. Ida and Yaoyorozu walked up front, and Ochako really couldn't see how 𝐶𝐸 saw that Yaoyorozu could ever be nervous, because the tall girl bowed and thanked the class with a confident smile on her face. But 𝐶𝐸 was genuinely good at assuaging people, and Ochako would take her thoughts for what they were. Ida, on the other hand, was genuinely flustered, if the way he kept karate chopping out of excitement as he thanked everyone was any indication. Ochako smiled. She had a good feeling about this. At Japanese period, Mr. Todoroki finished correcting everybody's assignments, before looking around at the class. Did you get class representatives yet? Midoriya-sensei was saying he was planning to do it today. Mr. Todoroki asked, pushing his glasses back on his nose. Yaoyorozu stood up and nodded. Yes, he did, Todoroki-sensei. Ida-san and I are the class representatives, she answered, Ida standing up as well. Mr. Todoroki assuaged the duo, before smiling slightly. Good choice, he said, making both Yaoyorozu and Ida flush. Thank you, Todoroki-sensei. The duo chorused, clearly pleased. Mr. Todoroki nodded, before announcing the class's death sentence. Now, I'd like you two to redistribute these assignments and the notebooks to everyone. I'll need to go retrieve your new worksheets. The class groaned collectively, and Mr. Todoroki stared at them dryly, a hint of amusement in his face, before walking out of the classroom. Ochako pouted. Mr. Todoroki wasn't as bad as God, Mr. Aizawa Heavens. He was so insistent. They call him Mr. Aizawa at school, but on God, he was a demon. The man was relentless in ensuring that the students understood the subject. He was fair, which Ochako couldn't begrudge him. But did he have to give them so many assignments? Of course, they weren't not doable, but Ochako would like a day off where she could just watch the new episode of Windfall. She hadn't watched it since school started without worrying about having to do her Japanese assignment. She then blinked. Wait a minute. Why would Mr. Todoroki know they were getting their class representatives today? Sure, he and Izuku were becoming fast friends, but what? If Katsuki's lunch table was a little too full of swears and laughter at the fact he had miserably lost the election, Ochako paid no mind to it. For she was about to discover how Ashido Mino was in fact a genius. There are 5 signs before the girls snap and decide to commit the grossest crime in the history of gross crimes, as witnessed by Katsuki. Unwillingly. Sign number 1. Izuku gets Mr. Half-and-Half's FC King number. Nobody knows this until Izuku gets a text message while he's stream rolling about how the shogunate gradually lost their influence. He stops when his phone goes off with a beep, and he looks alarmed, checking it to see if it's from the principal or some other higher-ups. Katsuki knows Izuku considers taxes to be bitches. He doesn't blame the guy for that. However, this is not taxes. This is something else. He grins, and then shakes his head with a chuckle. Ah, sorry guys. Where were we? Nobody knows it's Mr. Half-and-Half until Izuku laughs outside the corridor on the phone, saying, Ah, Todoroki-kun, you should have known I was in class. Wait, oh my god. Todoroki-kun, you're such a troll, I swear. Raccoon Eyes and Invisigirl are practically vibrating in their seats as they exchange identical looks of glee. Katsuki just rolls his eyes. Sign number 2. Mr. Half-and-Half makes the mistake of praising Izuku in class. It's not a mistake. Genuinely speaking, it is not a mistake at all. Mr. Caterpillar's done that too. You guys have a very good homeroom teacher, and you all better credit him. Now if any of you dares tell the brat I said this, you're getting expelled. Yes, Shinsu, I can have you expelled. But Mr. Half-and-Half might as well have been saying that Izuku hung the FC King moon. It happens like this. It's a study hour, and Raccoon Eyes grins and raises her hand up high. Mr. Half-and-Half doesn't even look up from his papers, and he only grimaces, clearly visible under the silver-framed glasses he's wearing. Yes, Ashido, he says, sounding tired. Todoroki-sensei, do you have a favorite teacher? Mr. Half-and-Half gives her a dubious look before shrugging. He's not opposed to personal questions unless you talk about his parents. There he just refuses to acknowledge your existence and Katsuki's, not going to go near that one with a 10-foot gardening hoe. Why is this important? Mr. Half-and-Half states more than asks, staring at Ashido. Well, here, the old man in the lesson confesses that if perhaps everyone admires a quality of their teacher, perhaps they can grow to be better people. I was just wondering if Todoroki-sensei has any connection of that sort. Ashido, we are not entitled to ask such personal questions to the teachers. Todoroki-sensei, I sincerely. Mr. Half-and-Half raises a hand, a wry look on his face. Ida, it's fine. Drink some water by the way. Ashido, I'll perhaps admit that I lose this time, I suppose. Fine. I don't have a favorite teacher, per se. But I do admire Midoriya-sensei's way of teaching the subject. It's personal and engaging in a way I believe few teachers are capable of. His love for the subject immediately rouses others, and I think that's very brilliant of him. The wry look on the teacher's face, much to Katsuki's horror, dissipates into something infinitely more disgustingly soft, and he even FC King smiles at the end, even as he pushes back his glasses, which were haphazardly placed on his nose. There's a FC King smile on his face. On the face of the man who laughs behind a blank face. Damn, Izuku. So, stop tricking me by lying that you're interested in the subject and get back to studying, Ashido. Raccoon Eyes squeaks, but she's grinning. Katsuki just rolls his eyes. Sign number 3. Izuku publicly admits to the class that he thinks Mr. Half-and-Half is cool. Midoriya-sensei, This time it's Uraraka, and she has the most sickeningly angelical grin on her face as she raises her hand. That grin has meant nothing good. In the few years Katsuki's known her, it means blackmail, extortion, and pure evil, and Katsuki isn't exaggerating. Izuku stops stream, rolling about the teaching system of the Edo period, and looks at Uraraka innocently. Katsuki holds his head in his hands. He can't 𝐹𝐶𝐭 hear this. I was just wondering. Uraraka makes sure to crack out the dimples. Well, 𝐹𝐶𝐭, the dimples definitely mean blackmail then. Does Midoriya-sensei have a favorite teacher? Glasses loses his shit, he gapes at Uraraka. But no one, not even Mr. Half-and-Half, can resist Uraraka when she's making that pouting little face. The lying little witch. Katsuki'd be almost impressed if he hasn't been on the receiving end on whatever disgusting blackmail followed after that grin. His keychain, the lying little witch stole away his damn merch with blackmail. But 𝐹𝐶𝐭 it. She had earned it fair and square too. And he couldn't be pissed off at that. Izuku pauses, looking like a deer in headlights. Please don't answer that. Please don't answer that. Please don't answer that. But of course. Izuku being, well, Izuku. Only 𝐹𝐶𝐭 brightens and laughs shyly, rubbing the back of his neck. Oh, wow. Well. This is hard. I love all the teachers, don't get me wrong. He waves his hands around, laughing nervously. Well, I really think Todoroki-sensei is cool, though. He's strict and professional in a way I never could be. But he's a really kind person too, and a very fair teacher. Say, Uraraka-san, why bring this up suddenly? Uraraka 𝐹𝐶𝐭 smiles like the sun. I was just wondering, when Midoriya-sensei is such a good teacher already, wouldn't he look up to some quality of teaching that these really cool Edo period teachers have been thinking about? Izuku is not fooled though. Uraraka-san, you can just say you were bored. Izuku deadpans, but he then smiles and goes back to the lesson. Katsuki snickers at her crestfallen face, but then reflects the expression when she gives a thumbs up to Invisigirl and raccoon eyes with a grin. 𝐹𝐶𝐭. Sign number 4. The two teachers make the mistake of poring over their comics in the library. Katsuki likes the library. Contrary to what other people think, he likes the quiet, because there isn't any goddamned noise to drive him up against the wall. Sure, the librarian is weird, but she's okay, he supposes. The girls like her though, given how much the woman coddles them on a daily basis. Unfortunately for him, he chooses the corner of the library, which he finds out, that happens to be full of geeks. See now, Katsuki was minding his own business, reading away on a rather interesting article provided by Discovery on the effects of cellulose hexanitrate. It's 𝐹𝐶𝐭 fascinating, because, sue him. Cellulose was pretty ubiquitous, and to find that herbivores contained something that could be filtered to create explosives was nothing short of interesting. That's until he hears Izuku's voice, and he gapes at the bookshelf in front of him. Say, Todoroki-kun, don't you think it's interesting that out of all of the 7 sins, it was wrath who decided that this whole conflict was pointless? Mr. Half-and-Half 𝐹𝐶𝐭 hummed. It's an illusion. Wrath comes and goes. While it comes, it devastates. While it leaves the bearer hollow. Now, I'm compelled to find that the most annoying one out of all of them is pride. Izuku snorted. Yeah, pride is a douchebag. Mr. Half-and-Half 𝐹𝐶𝐭 snickers. Snicker, Katsuki says. It's a soft sound, and somehow, his teacher manages to make that sound polite, even if he himself isn't that polite most of the time. Pride is supposed to be annoying. Yeah, but to the point you're so proud of yourself that you disguise yourself as a sweet little kid, and as the son of the guy who wants to stab your guts. That's just galling. Mr. Half-and-Half snorts. Katsuki sits up straight, eyes goggling. He can't 𝐹𝐶𝐭 believe this. He can't believe that his teachers are laughing about Fullmetal Alchemist, because what else they'd be talking about? Oh my god, they're geeking out about anime. Raccoon eyes 𝐹𝐶𝐭 gushes next to him, and Katsuki threw up his hands, before slapping on a headset. Sign number 5. Izuku 𝐹𝐶𝐭 talks about Mr. Half-and-Half to Auntie and Co. of all the people. It happens like this. It's been 2 months since Izuku's job, and Auntie and Co. wanted to celebrate, so he got invited with Uraraka, the old hag, and his old man. Mr. and Mrs. Uraraka are away on some job on the other, so Uraraka's been staying with Auntie and Co. for now, considering Izuku was living in an apartment of his own, and most probably would find it awkward to look after his own student as a legal guardian. The Yagis are there too, which means Mr. Caterpillar is slurping on his soup like a cat in some weird-ass corner. God, was it 𝐹𝐶𝐭 weird? Katsuki is busy digging into 𝐀𝐦 𝐍𝐭 𝐖𝐴 when the horror begins. So, Izuku dear, how is your job going? Auntie asks with a smile, and Izuku smirks a little at Katsuki, who blows a raspberry at him. His mom laughs and his dad starts chuckling. Mr. Caterpillar snorts. It's going great, Mom. In fact, might stay as Kaken's homeroom teacher till he graduates. The old hag howls with laughter, slapping the table, and his dad chokes before giggling into his handkerchief, while Auntie 𝐀𝐦 laughs into her hand. And Katsuki is livid because Uraraka, the 𝐓𝐡𝐬𝐭 traitor, is laughing her head off too. Huh? What the hell, nerd sensei? Katsuki screeches, and his mom has legitimate tears pouring out of her eyes with how hard she's laughing. Kid, I like you. His mom crows with a smirk, and she and Izuku share a high five, grinning. Katsuki stares at his sashimi in despair as all the adults in the room laugh. He's doing well, Mr. Caterpillar says, surprisingly soft, and Auntie 𝐀𝐦 looks close to crying. Aw, geez, 𝐲𝐴-san, you're giving me too much credit, Izuku says, blushing. My boy, I'm sure 𝐲𝐴 is saying the truth here, Old Man Yagi says with a smile, holding Mr. Caterpillar's hand. Mr. Caterpillar, for his part, whacks Izuku's neck with a satisfying karate chop using his free hand, and Izuku yelps. I don't give compliments easy, Izuku. You should know that. Izuku smiles like the motherfucking son. Thank you, 𝐲𝐴-san. Katsuki stuffs more food into his mouth. Whatever. So, Izuku, dear, getting on well with your colleagues? Izuku then brightens up like a 𝐓𝐡𝐬𝐭 dandelion. Oh yeah, you know Todoroki cut, right? At that, several things happen all at once. Katsuki chokes. Uraraka stares. Mr. Caterpillar stops eating. And Auntie 𝐀𝐦, who does not understandably appreciate the gravity of this, nods eagerly, looking interested. Mr. Caterpillar raises an eyebrow. I knew you two made up after your terrible first impressions of each other. But really? Izuku nods, a little bashful before smiling. Yeah. But he's really a great guy, 𝐲𝐴-san. Mr. Caterpillar stares like he's not sure what to do or say. Katsuki can 𝐓𝐡𝐬𝐭 relate. Old Man Yagi looks at this mushy mess with the pride of a mother lioness. Katsuki would know. He's watched The Lion King only 100 times. Not that he'll admit it, even on the threat of death. Katsuki and Uraraka share a look. If Izuku talks about someone to his mom, it must mean he really admires them. Izuku doesn't talk about just anybody to his mother. They know this as well as they know that the cremator 𝐓𝐡𝐬𝐭 likes it when he has to ride a motorbike with Windfall's protagonist. And Katsuki does not like that glint in Uraraka's eyes. Katsuki was right to doubt Uraraka, because next day, he's faced with the irrefutable knowledge that his Japanese teacher is in fact gay, and the horror began. How in the name of ever-loving 𝐓𝐡𝐬𝐭 do you know this? Katsuki hissed at Uraraka in the boys' lockers during P.E. class. Uraraka grins. Deku-kun told me because he was so happy about finally finding someone to talk about it to. Apparently, Todoroki-sensei trusts all three of us not to say it to anyone else. Plus, he says it's a good way of not making a big deal out of it, she says, winking. Katsuki wants to die. If only he could tell the dumb teacher that this was a 𝐓𝐡𝐬𝐭 mistake. Are you insane? Uraraka gives him a challenging smirk. Oh come on. Don't tell me you don't think Izuku deserves to die alone. She taunts, and Katsuki groans, holding his head. Oi, Uraraka, are you seriously 𝐓𝐡𝐬𝐭 telling me? Uraraka grinned. Actually, Ashido-chan wasn't sure if we could, just not ship Todoroki-sensei and Deku-kun. But if I just give her the okay, Katsuki is going to point-blank ignore the fact that Uraraka just admitted to people shipping the two youngest teachers together. Nope. Oi. Are you really just going to tell a bunch of people about our Japanese teacher's equality? Uraraka facepalms. What are you living in? The 2000s? Nobody cares who's gay and who's straight anymore. Katsuki rubbed his forehead, glaring at her. I don't know, 𝐓𝐡𝐬𝐭, I can't believe this. Uraraka winked. It'll be fun. It'll be hell. Katsuki droned out. Uraraka then smirked. What, you think we can't do it? Katsuki snorted. I know you can't do it, round face. He challenges. Uraraka's smirk widens. Wanna bet, Blasty? Katsuki smirks back. I'll take you on that. If one of your dumbass schemes to get nerd sensei and half and half sensei together works by the end of the sports festival, I'll give you every single one of my Windfall merch for 1 month. No take-backs. Katsuki knows it's not gonna happen. Uraraka smirks like the devil. You're on. And if I don't, you get to have all of my 𝗔𝗏𝗄 𝗔𝗂𝐻𝐵. Katsuki glares at her. He doesn't want to actually admit to the fact that he thinks that Kagami Takahiro and the cremator should definitely FCK and have definitely FCK'd, but fine. Uraraka had quality doujinshis anyway. Fine, you're on. Katsuki challenges, spitting on his hand and stretching it out. Uraraka spits on her hand as well, and they shake it firmly, just as they used to as kids. It was on. It was FCKing on. Izuku sneezed. So did Todoroki. Got a cold, Midoriya? Todoroki asks softly, mismatched eyes concerned. Izuku rubs his nose. I'm fine, Todoroki-kun. You? I don't seem to have a cold either. Must be the season. Todoroki said, contemplative, before shrugging and correcting the worksheets he had given to Class 1 2 days ago. Izuku shrugs. Probably. In that case, we should both take care of ourselves. True. Omake. Windfall blooper series no. 2. The information will arrive by tonight. Pretty bird. Keigo widened his eyes. Tauya only called him that in private. You know, when they were in the bed. When they were FCKing each other senseless. When nobody else was there. Not in public. And certainly not in the FCKing show. Tauya must have realized as well, because he stared at Keigo dumbly before looking at the cameraman. Cut? He asked uncertainly, voice reverting back to his normal tone. The director, Shigaraki Seijiro, shook his head, smiling. No, I find it a very good addition to the plot. Keep calling him that. Keigo and Tauya shared a dumbstruck look as the director walked away. Impressing Shigaraki, one of the most prolific directors in Japan's cinematic history, with an improv was difficult. Did I just? Yeah, Keigo said, looking dumbfounded. Toga, for the last time, it is not a FCKing PP. Tauya said, his voice patient despite the coarse language. Toga Himiko pouted at the string around Tauya's waist. Keigo tried not to laugh. Is it a PP though? Bubegawara asked, curious. Keigo burst out in laughter. If it's not a PP, then what is it? Toga asked, pouting. I don't know, maybe you should go look for it. And while you're at it, look for your maturity too. Tauya said calmly, ruffling Toga's hair and smirking when she protested. Keigo shook his head. Alright guys, the cameraman will yell cut in a second. Keiken, that is a PP, right? Toga asked, pointing to the suspender around Tauya's waist. Keigo stared, before grinning at the expression on Tauya's face, now covered with purple makeup and fake staples. Yes, it is a PP, he said, grinning wider when Tauya glared at him. Toga cackled. Izuku did not like the glint in either Ishido's or Ochako's eyes, which was a recurring theme for a few days. But there was no way in hell that he could have seen this coming, when he thinks about it much later. And by this, well, he means their very convoluted matchmaking. Not that Izuku would complain about it later on, given that was what had actually got him and 𝐀𝐦 together in the first place. But hell if he hadn't been bewildered by it, the first he heard about it. So Bakugo told you that we have till the sports festival? Ishido asked Ochako at lunch, eyes wide. Ochako nodded enthusiastically, grinning like Christmas had come early. Well, neither of them were Christians, but still, the point stood. Yup. And I bet we can get Todoroki-sensei and Midoriya-sensei together by then, she said, punching the air with a determined grin. Ishido raised an eyebrow. Really? I mean, Bakugo told us you knew Midoriya-sensei since kindergarten, but Ochako smirked. Leave it up to me, Ishido clapped her shoulder. Huh, didn't think you had it in you, Uraraka-chan, Ochako laughed. Well, I've known. Here she lowered her voice. Deku-kun for a long time Todoroki-sensei is totally his type. And that would be insanely hot? Ishido asked, letting out a dreamy sigh. Ochako's smile turned into a dubious grimace, just slightly. Yes, Mr. Todoroki was pretty good looking. She wouldn't put it as crudely as Ishido. But she wasn't sure if she wanted to think about him that way, Izuku's age or not. It was pretty awkward, considering Izuku had laughed about the man not having a single romantic bone in his body. If the way he didn't seem to understand that Ling and Lan Fan had chemistry in Fullmetal Alchemist was any indication, or at least that was what she heard from their library geek-out sessions anyway. I was thinking more on the lines of being nice, sweet and awkward. But yeah, that works too, Ochako said, dryly. Ishido giggled. This is gonna be so fun, Ochako grinned. Couldn't argue with that. 𝐀𝐦 sneezed into his handkerchief on his way to 1B. wondering why he felt like he was about to be lowered into his grave. Probably the fact of having to deal with Tetsutetsu's screaming again. Why he had an extra pair of lungs was beyond Xiaodo's understanding. You're planning to set up Midoriya-sensei and Todoroki-sensei together. By the end of the sports festival, Tsuyu asked Ochako, once she returned to their usual lunch table after her conversation with Ishido. Ida gaped at her, while Xiaoji and Tokoyami widened their eyes at her. Ochako pouted. Can you guys not look at me like I'm trying to scribble on Tokyo Tower or something? Ida gasped, and Tsuyu shook her head. Xiaoji only grimaced at that, and Tokoyami exhaled. Oh come on, it's just a little harmless matchmaking, Ochako protested, folding her arms with a pout. Uraraka-kun, I understand that Midoriya-sensei is your childhood friend. But too, Ida started, hands going off their usual karate chop sequences. It's kinda impossible. Besides, are they even interested in each other? Xiaoji asked, squinting. Ochako grinned. Oh, I can sense a little interest from Deku-kun's side. Yes, she said, truthfully. Izuku did seem fond of Todoroki, and he did talk about the other man to his mother. After all, he rarely did that, strictly speaking. Do you even know if this'll work? Tokoyami asked, raising an eyebrow. Ochako shuddered. For the sake of my pride, yes. Ida glared at her. Uraraka-kun, Ochako slumped on the table, pouting. Come on, Ida-kun, think of it from my perspective. Please, do enlighten me. Ida deadpan. The others leaned in, interested. Ochako sighed, remembering the whole reason she wanted to see Izuku in a relationship. I've known Deku-kun since he was in high school. He's not as well, buff. Ochako blushed and coughed a little. Tsuyu blushed as well. The boys looked vaguely uncomfortable, Xiaoji, even blushing. Ochako coughed again. As he is now. He was a plain, scrawny-looking kid, but I knew he was the best ever. Ochako said, pouting. The meanies that were Izuku's old high school classmates. Ochako wanted to just have a little talk with them, really. She huffed, before continuing. Every time Valentine's Day rolled over, it was the saddest because Ochako sighed. Well, he's the best. I didn't understand why girls wouldn't give him chocolates. Then he started working out, and Ochako wrinkled her nose. Weird people would just pick him up on dates just because he was good looking. She growled under her breath now, frustrated. I don't want that for Deku-kun. I know Deku-kun wants to be in a good relationship, and I want Deku-kun to be in a relationship with somebody nice, kind, sweet and funny. And Todoroki-sensei makes him feel comfortable, so you know. She sighed out, drooping on the table with her arms splayed out on the table. I just want to see Deku-kun happy. If I make him happy, I'll be happy too, I'll be happy knowing that. Ochako's mind suddenly reconjured an image from her childhood. Say, Deku-kun. A 5-year-old Ochako said, snuggling into Izuku's lap. Izuku readjusted her in his lap better, before wrapping his arms around her gently. Yeah? You make me happy, Ochako squealed, looking up at him with a wide grin. That I made him happy. Somehow. Like he did, for me. Ochako said so softly, even she didn't hear it. Wow. She hadn't even realized a choked-up sound from nearby interrupted her thoughts, and Ochako turned her head, only to be met with a teary-eyed Ida. Ida-kun, Ochako squealed, shocked. Uraraka-kun, forgive me. I have misunderstood you once more, Ida declared, bowing. Ida, relax. Xiaoji said gently, patting Ida's back. Ochako gaped. Eh? Ida swallowed. I didn't know of your noble intentions. I'm most sorry for this. Ochako sat up straight, flustered as she flailed her hands around. She certainly wouldn't put her intentions as noble. Good heavens, Ida sure was high-strung. Oh that's not. Xiaoji kept on patting Ida. Say, Ochakon, that's really sweet of you. But do you think it'll work? Tsuyu asked, and Ochako pouted. It has to, she said, puffing her cheeks out. Does Todoroki-sensei even have any interest in? Tokoyami asked, raising an eyebrow. Ochako shrugged. Well, if I lock them up in a closet for 7 minutes, we'll find out, right? Besides, between you and me, anyone who has hair like Todoroki-sensei is definitely not straight. And we've progressed way beyond homophobia and guessing somebody's sexuality at this point. She said, shrugging. Ida blushed and sputtered. Tsuyu stared. Xiaoji coughed, his cheeks flushed. Tokoyami stared at her. I didn't know you had it in you, Uraraka. Tokoyami said, sounding impressed as well as horrified. Ochako giggled. Well, That's my final plan. Yeah, not that I had any plan in the first place, I mean. It's not like I can just ask Auntie and Ko to, well, make dinner for both Deku-kun and Todoroki-sensei. Keep blurting them out, Ochakun. It works out better that way. Tsuyu noted, making Ochako blush and look around in surprise. Wait, you guys are with me on this? Ida sat up straight. Ensuring your teacher's happiness is a noble pursuit. If it fails, we shall try something else, Xiaoji shrugged. It's not wrong, exactly. We won't tell anyone. Takoyami shrugged. It sounds impossible, but you also sound like you know what you're doing. It elicited a nervous laugh out of Ochako, because she really didn't know what she was doing. It sounds a little fun, actually. Tsuyu says, looking contemplative. Ochako grinned. Thanks, guys, so. Let's get this show on the road. So these are the plans? Ashido asked with interest, as soon as they got to the library later that day. Ochako smirked. Yep, she said, holding up a thumbs up. Ashido rubbed her hands in glee. You mind if I bring Hagakure-chan and the rest of the willing participants on this? They really want it in. She whispered, grinning. Ochako blinked. They don't mind? Ashido laughed, waving a hand. Honey, everybody ships Midoriya-sensei and Todoroki-sensei together. Especially after everyone's seen them geeking out over their manga collections in the library. Ochako laughed nervously. Huh, should have expected that. Ashido grinned. So, Spill, first off, you're gonna try asking Midoriya-sensei to invite Todoroki-sensei over to his house. Ochako giggled. It's just a suggestion, but if it works out, then it's great, she said, winking. It in fact did work out, much to Ochako's glee. When they jogged next morning, and Katsuki kept jogging away, Ochako nudged Izuku's elbow as they sat under a tree. Yeah, Izuku asked, breath coming out in puffs. You're close to Todoroki-sensei, right? Ochako asked, now suddenly nervous. It was all well and good to plan and bet on it, but to actually do it was another issue entirely altogether. Izuku blinked, startled at the question. Why do you ask? He asked, just as cagey as she was. Ochako didn't know why he was cagey. Was it because he actually had a crush on the other man? Did he wonder if Ochako was trying to pull some ropes? Wait a minute. No wonder he looked so suspicious. She only giggled, making Izuku look even more suspicious. I'm not trying to get you to tell me when the Japanese assignments are being distributed, Ochako said, laughing. Izuku heaved out a sigh of relief. Oh, good. Not that I thought you'd be up to it, but maybe one or two of the other kids might have asked you. Of course, I know you won't accept, but still. Ochako still kept giggling. I get it, Deku-kun. Izuku heaved yet another sigh of relief. Oh good. Why do you ask? By the way, Ochako grinned. Why don't you invite him to your house? Way easier than geeking out about manga in the school library. Izuku's cheeks flushed. Wait, you know about that? Ochako snorted. This man. Really? What had she been so nervous about? Again. Deku-kun. The whole school knows you and Todoroki-sensei geek out about your manga in the library. Izuku laughed nervously. Yikes. Maybe I should set up a date. Not that kind, he screeched, upon seeing the grin on her face. I didn't say anything. Ochako said, smiling innocently. Izuku narrowed his eyes at her. Ha ha. Very funny. I know you teenagers. You've got nothing on your brains save for dates and kissing. None of that's happening between your teachers, so pipe down. He said, rolling his eyes. Ochako laughed. Deku-kun, that's mean, she said, swatting his arm with a giggle. It would be mean if it wasn't the truth. I was a teenager too, you know. Izuku said, dryly. Ochako snickered. I know. Izuku looked thoughtful, licking permanently scarred lips. He probably may not have gotten any Hanmei Choco as a teenager, but what he had gotten into was a lot of fights. Even in college. Honestly, it had been a miracle that Izuku hadn't gotten into a hospital the whole time. Well, you're right. I'll ask him if he wants to meet up somewhere. He wanted to talk about Senyu, and I have the manga volumes as well. He said contemplatively, rubbing his chin. Ochako grinned. Will it work? Ashido asked, at lunchtime that day. Ochako sure felt nervous at seeing the interested participants' expected gazes on her. She hadn't realized so many of her classmates shipped her friend with Mr. Todoroki. But oh well, that was to be expected. There was, well, Aoyama, who winked at her, Kaminari, who sat with a grin, Shiro, who looked very interested, Kirishima, who was the only one to grin reassuringly at her, Hagakure, who looked close to bursting with excitement, Jiru, who looked like she had been kidnapped, Shinsu looking very much the same, and of course, the very interested Ashido Mina. Ochako shrugged. I'll let you. No? She asked, smiling nervously. Ashido pouted. You'd better. Ochako nearly squealed when she saw Izuku talking to Mr. Todoroki just before classes let out for the day. Feeling bold, she inched closer to a wall, hiding herself from their view and peeking at them, straining to hear their conversation. Say, Todoroki-kun, Izuku asked cheerily. Yeah, Midoriya, what is it? Want to come over to my house sometime? I have the whole collection of the Senyu manga. You don't have to, of course. Just a suggestion. Izuku now was genuinely nervous. He was waving his hands around as he smiled, but sweat was rolling down his cheeks, quite close to the fuzz of hair he had buzzed off. I'd love to. Besides, the library doesn't have the Senyu manga. Todoroki said softly. Izuku blinked. Wait, what, really? Todoroki smiled, definitely amused now. Ochako barely resisted a muffled squeal as the other man smiled. Smiled, Ochako says. The man never smiled. Okay, that was a bit of an exaggeration, considering how he had smiled that one time when he found out who the class representatives were, but wait. She had to listen. She was getting way ahead of herself. Yeah, I checked today, and I thought of asking you to discuss about maybe Gray Man instead, since it was the only other series in there. But considering the hiatus, I wasn't sure if you'd want to discuss it. This sounds a lot better, he said reassuringly. Izuku looked close to exploding with joy. Don't mess this up now, Ochako urged Izuku on mentally. It seemed that her brain waves must have worked, because Izuku coughed a few times before regaining his composure and smiled. Great. Saturday, then. Todoroki looked contemplative before his expression cleared, and he smiled again. This was getting ridiculously good. Not a problem. I'll be there at 10 a.m. I'll take a cab. Izuku blinked. Well, I don't want you to get lost in the traffic. How about this? You can wait for me here at the train station, and we'll take a metro to my apartment. Todoroki blinked. But won't that be? Izuku waved a hand. It's not a problem. I've been wondering what to do with my salary anyway. He joked. Todoroki raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? Izuku laughed. Positive. It won't be a problem. The train? Together. This couldn't possibly get any better. They'd have to share a seat, or stand together. Maybe something cute would happen, and the two would realize their crushes, and Ochako slapped her cheeks. Get a hold of yourself, Izuku nodded, clearly excited. Yeah, no problem at all. See you then, Midoriya, Todoroki said, nodding at him. Izuku grinned and waved. See you then, Todoroki-kun. Ochako punched the air victoriously. Yes, she cheered to herself. Uraraka, what are you doing here? Alas, she hadn't noticed that her teacher had noticed her. And once she did so, well, Ochako did the best thing she could. She screamed at the sound of her teacher's voice and promptly ran into a bush. Uraraka? Todoroki yelled out in alarm, only causing Ochako to whimper and get up, before running through the school garden's hedges and right out into the gate, not willing herself to think how ridiculous she must have looked. 𝐲𝐸 knew he wasn't exactly approachable, but the way Uraraka had been standing near the school gate, and the way she had ran through the hedges was baffling. It was nothing short of weird. Kind of reminded him of the time 𝐀𝐦 had ran out of the hot springs screaming something about leeches, while there was no business for leeches being in hot springs, and all while Tauya had cackled like a madman. Kind of. Todoroki-kun? Midoriya asked curiously, popping up next to him. 𝐲𝐸 rubbed an eye with his knuckle. Is Uraraka scared of me or something? He asked. Of course, Midoriya had told him all about Bakugo and Uraraka. Midoriya snorted. That girl scares off death itself. He then looked concerned. Why do you ask? 𝐲𝐸 shrugged, feeling a little put off honestly. Was he that scary looking? It wasn't like he was as scarred as Tauya's character in his series. Of course, he only had the burn scar around his left eye from the stupid accident he had had while attempting to learn cooking from his mother. But heck, that had healed to a very pale patch of red around his eye anyway. Was he seriously that intimidating? 𝐲𝐸 didn't like the thought of a student finding him intimidating for no good reason at all. She was standing here, and the second she spotted me, she screamed and ran off. Midoriya blinked, laughing. You sure it was you she got scared off by? It's not like you're very scary, you know. 𝐲𝐡𝐢 didn't pout. That was for 𝐁𝐲 and 𝐕𝘐𝐬. Pouting wasn't his thing. I know that. And I'm sure that she ran off screaming upon having seen me. Midoriya blinked, now having understood 𝐲𝐡𝐢's concerns. Ah, well. I'll ask her about it, he offered. 𝐲𝐡𝐢 didn't want to abuse Midoriya's friendship like this. The other man was a very good friend. But this was baffling, and 𝐲𝐡𝐢 wanted answers. Please, if it's not a bother, of course. Midoriya waved a hand. Not a problem. 𝐀𝐦 and I tell each other mostly everything. I'll have her clear it up. 𝐲𝐡𝐢 nodded, pensive. Midoriya laughed, clapping 𝐲𝐡𝐢's shoulder. 𝐲𝐡𝐢 was not a fan of physical touch, but neither was he touchy about it as Tauya was. Besides, Midoriya's hand was nice and warm. Also very strong. Very strong. Cheer up, Todoroki-kun. I'm pretty sure it must have been something simple. Midoriya said, grinning. 𝐲𝐡𝐢 shrugged. I'm not letting it upset me. You sure, Todoroki-kun? Midoriya teased, smirking slightly. 𝐲𝐡𝐢 glared at him, but Midoriya must have seen how he didn't actually mean to glare at him, because the infuriating man only laughed. Midoriya Izuku, 𝐲𝐡𝐢 decided, was something else altogether. But he didn't mind. In fact, it was nice. Really nice, if he was being honest. Being with Midoriya, that was. And no matter what 𝐁𝐲 said, it wasn't a crush. It was absolutely not, 𝐲𝐡𝐢 thought resolutely, as Midoriya waved cheerily, leaving 𝐲𝐡𝐢 behind to stare at that wonderfully broad back. Shit. It wasn't a crush, right? He knew Midoriya for 2.5 months. There was no way this was a crush. Right. 𝐲𝐡𝐢 fought the blush rising on his cheeks. FCK. The next day was hell for Ochako. Mostly embarrassment hell. Say, Ochako. Ochako stiffened as they jogged. Yeah? Care to explain why you ran away from Todoroki-kun yesterday? Izuku asked, stopping and slurping some water out of his bottle, a curious eye on Ochako all the while. Ochako, for her part, only winced. I was actually waiting for, Ashido-chan. Katsuki snorted as he passed them, making Ochako shoot a glare at him, which he returned with a very enthusiastic middle finger. Izuku, for his part, watched this byplay with resignation. Izuku gave up trying to understand their little byplays by now, after all, and wasn't that a good thing? Ochako thought nervously as she kept explaining. And I wasn't expecting Todoroki-sensei to, appear out of nowhere, she lied glibly, waving her hands around. Izuku chuckled, releasing the water bottle, and thereby causing water to drip down his neck. He was actually kind of hurt. He thought he was scary, Ochako blushed. That had not been her intention. I'll, explain, she offered meekly. Izuku laughed. No need, I'll pass it on, he said with a grin, patting her shoulder. Ochako widened her eyes. Really? Izuku nodded, flicking her forehead fondly. Really. Ochako glared at Ishido and the other truants. You guys owe me one, she said dramatically. Kaminari blinked. What happened? Ochako pouted, blushing with embarrassment as she haltingly explained what had happened the last evening. Ayama widened his eyes, patting her shoulder with an awkward smile, then on. Uraraka, ma chérie, don't mind. I'm sure Todoroki-sensei thought nothing of it afterward. Besides, Midoriya-sensei promised he'd explain, right? Ochako hid her face behind her hands. I'm just embarrassed, she squeaked out, as the others laughed at her. 𝐲𝐡𝐢 felt ready to fling his phone out of the window at the text on his screen. Tauya, 12:45 p.m. You finally gonna get some baby bro you. 12:45 p.m. FCK off, asshole. Why did Nissan even tell you anyway? Tauya, 12:46 p.m. Rude. It is my solemn duty as a brother to embarrass you. 12:46 p.m. It's your solemn duty to feed me bullshit. More accurately. 𝐲𝐡𝐢 exhaled. Okay, so maybe he had told 𝐕𝘐𝐬 that maybe his friend had invited him over to his apartment. Did she really have to tell everyone else though? Frowning, 𝐲𝐡𝐢 sighed out in annoyance, pocketing his phone. He really was done for, he thought mournfully, looking out the window. Windfall blooper series no. 3 FCK. Cut. Tauya glared at the cameraman. The FCK, you're cutting it for that? Todoroki, the series is for teenagers. The director deadpanned. Tauya snorted. Sir, with all due respect, my youngest brother cussed me off when he was 13. Keigo laughed from somewhere far away from the set. My son cussed me off when he was 14. Believe me, I know. But the fact remains that the tabloids will create a whole lot of issues if you're found swearing on the show. The director deadpanned. 𝐀𝐦 blew a raspberry the second the director got up and turned away to address some lighting issue. Can't even cuss. 𝐀𝐦 grumbled petulantly. You know that we're not supposed to cuss, right? Ah man, you're right. It 𝐓𝐡𝐤 sucks not being able to cuss on the show. Like, who are we even corrupting anyway? 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝐻 rambled off. 𝐀𝐦 rubbed his head. You're telling me, common sense you. It's gonna be so fun drinking your juice. 𝐀𝐦 blinked, putting down the fake gun. Hey, 𝐜𝐴 blinked. Wait, what? Cut. I was supposed to say BLD, wasn't I? 𝐀𝐦 sighed. Yeah. But you need to give me your apple juice too. 𝐜𝐴 whined, and 𝐀𝐦 rubbed his head. He was not paid enough for this. Say, Deku-kun, Izuku blinked, as 𝐻𝐡𝐤 approached him with a water bottle. Receiving it, he quirked an eyebrow at her curiously. Did you invite Todoroki-sensei yet? 𝐻𝐡𝐤 asked, nudging his elbow with hers. Katsuki spat out a full mouthful of water. Huh? Izuku blinked at Katsuki's reaction before smiling at 𝐻𝐡𝐤. Yeah, he should be taking the train with me Saturday evening. That's tomorrow, Katsuki roared at the same time 𝐻𝐡𝐤 squealed with joy. The plan was coming together. Of course, there was still a lot more left to, make the whole matchmaking scheme a grand success. But 𝐻𝐡𝐤 can't believe how swimmingly everything's been going so far and, she should listen to what Izuku's saying. Wait, but isn't Saturday a holiday? How is he going to visit you? 𝐻𝐡𝐤 asked, eyes wide. Izuku shrugged. Todoroki-kun agreed to meet me up at the station near the school so that we can take the train back here. 𝐻𝐡𝐤 grinned, vibrating with excitement. This was going so well. Katsuki glared at 𝐻𝐡𝐤, who smirked. Why is that important, anyway? Izuku asked, raising an eyebrow. 𝐻𝐡𝐤 grinned. It's just nice to see you're having friends over, Deku-kun. She cheered, patting his back. Izuku squinted. Why do I get the feeling there's something more to that? You're just paranoid. Because there's something more to it, dumbass. Izuku blinked, eyes shifting between the pair before rolling his eyes and slurping down some water. He somehow had the feeling he did not want to know what those two were up to. 𝐲𝐸 really hated 𝐀𝐦. Not really, but you get the idea. Out of all three of his siblings, 𝐀𝐦 was the most infuriating. I'm just saying, you like this guy, kiddo? Why don't you make a move for it? You're one to talk. You waited 3 years working in a tattoo parlor for 𝐀𝐦 to make a move on you. 𝐲𝐸 hissed, even as he narrowly avoided a swerving biker. He glared, holding the phone away from him, and set it on the roof of the car radio, putting it on speaker before driving again. Stupidly slow second-hand car. Of course, father had been willing to buy him a new car, but 𝐲𝐸 was having none of it. He did not want his father's money associated with him in any goddamned way. Why do you think I'm asking you to make a move, dumbass? 𝐀𝐦 asked calmly, and 𝐲𝐸 hated the fact his brother could sound caring and smug at the same time. Probably because this is funny to you. 𝐲𝐸 deadpanned. 𝐀𝐦 laughed, voice raspy from cigarettes. That and I may give two shits about your love life, not ending up as disastrously as mom's did. 𝐲𝐸 only winced at the reminder of their mother's love life. Poor woman hadn't deserved any of that at all. Look, Midoriya is a good friend. That's it. He found himself saying, a scowl on his face. Despite the apparently nice muscles, 𝐀𝐦 teased, and 𝐲𝐸 almost choked. The hell, 𝐀𝐦 laughed. Kid, Fuyu and Natsu told me tales of your thirsting. 𝐲𝐸 groaned. All I said was that it was nice that he worked out so much I didn't say anything else, he protested, parking the car near the school. Coming from you, that's as good as an admission to wanting to 𝐓𝐡𝐤 him senseless. There was a pause. Or wanting to get 𝐓𝐡𝐤 senseless. I don't want to know the specifics, but just know that it's okay with you preferring either. Of course, people switch all the time, but you get my drift. 𝐲𝐸 glared at his phone, brain close to an aneurysm because of the mirth in his older brother's voice. I hate you. Love you too, baby bro. Now, duty calls. 𝐲𝐸 rolled his eyes. You mean you have to go back to staring at 𝐀𝐤 shamelessly on international television? 𝐀𝐦 laughed, but it was softer now. Something like that. Bye. Bye. And leave Midoriya out of this. I just think he's a good friend. 𝐲𝐸 warned firmly. 𝐀𝐦 snickered. Sure? That's why you're staying with him for a whole ass day, eh? Just to geek over manga. Yes. Keep telling yourself that, baby bro. With that, 𝐀𝐦 hung up. leaving 𝐲𝐻𝐻 to glare at his phone with heated cheeks. Mom, do you think cooking katsudon for a guest is too much? Izuku couldn't help but ask after a while, while taking the train to his house that evening. 𝐴𝐻𝐻 laughed. Izuku, dear, you're overthinking this. Izuku blushed, and instinctively shrunk back into his seat further. I know, but, it's been a long while since I had somebody over that wasn't a full group of 20. Mom, geez. He admitted sheepishly, rubbing the back of his neck. 𝐴𝐻𝐻 giggled. Izuku, you told me that Todoroki-kun was okay with this, didn't you? You don't have to stress out so much. Unless what? Mom? Izuku whined, clapping one hand over his other ear to hear her better. 𝐴𝐻𝐻 laughed again. Your crush is that obvious, then, dear, Izuku pouted. Mom. 𝐴𝐻𝐻 couldn't help but laugh once more. Just ask him what he likes, cold soba. Izuku said so quickly that once he did so, he blushed at the memory. Say, Todoroki-kun, you seem to eat soba a lot. Izuku said, looking curiously at Todoroki's simple hand-wrapped meal of soba noodles. There was just some wasabi and onions on the side, but apart from that, there was nothing else to give it flavor. That's because soba is my favorite. Want some? Todoroki asked, proffering some on his chopsticks. Izuku blinked. Wait, what, really? He asked, surprised at this new fact about Todoroki. Well, not surprised at the fact, but at the fact it was shared so readily. Todoroki looked away, cheeks flushed. If you don't want it, Izuku flailed his arms around dramatically, flustered. Nah, that's not what I meant to imply, but he heaved an inhale. Are you okay with you giving me your food? He asked timidly, blinking. When Todoroki looked at him again, he had a fond smile on his face. My mother always used to tell me that a meal tastes best when shared. Izuku blushed. Oh, that's really sweet. You don't mind then? Todoroki shook his head, proffering his soba-covered chopsticks. Izuku held out his plate, watching as Todoroki placed the soba on said plate, before slurping them down. His eyes grew in size. This is good, he said, around a muffled mouthful of soba noodles. Is it? Izuku nodded vigorously, willing himself not to blush furiously at the pleased smile on Todoroki's face. Well, then, I don't see why you have to worry, Izuku, 𝐴𝐻𝐻 now said, and Izuku winced as he practically heard the grin on his mother's face. Izuku pouted. Stop. He whined, resting his head against the armrest. It's not like I need the whole world to tell me I have a crush on a guy who happens to be way out of my league. Izuku screamed in his head as he heard his mother coo at him. Sue Izuku for being nervous. But he cleaned up his room thrice before leaving for the station, nervously checking his phone. Sure, Todoroki wouldn't mind the, extensive presence of All Might merch. But well, Izuku couldn't help but feel really nervous. The soba packet was there in the kitchen, so that could be crossed off his mental list. No chance of the Yagi couple calling him for anything they had gone to a ryokan, and Izuku preferred not to think too much about that particular event. He liked his sanity, thank you very much. His mom was busy looking after Ochako. Katsuki wasn't going to call him, even when he was on the verge of death. Which, pity really. But Izuku had washed his hands clean off that child a long time ago, right? Everything was going to go well. Hopefully. Locking his door, Izuku exhaled. Right. Got to call a cab to go to the train station he had told he'd meet Todoroki at. Right. Cool. Fine. Okay. He was going to see Todoroki in casual clothes. That was not an issue. Nope. Nah, not an issue. He could handle the already very good-looking Todoroki in casual clothes. Who was he kidding? He, Izuku, in ratty old jeans and a faded long-sleeved shirt, was gonna look like a complete dork next to Todoroki. It turned out, Todoroki was far dorkier than he was. If the black t-shirt depicting Lord Vader in his villainous glory against a red background was any indication. Izuku wasn't sure whether to scream or laugh. He settled with smiling. Hey, Todoroki-kun. Nice t-shirt. Todoroki glared at him, but Izuku grinned further upon seeing the lack of heat in the expression. Yours literally says shirt. I'd like to think I have more taste than that. The former deadpanned, making Izuku chuckle upon seeing his own shirt. So, if we're going with Star Wars, I have the whole Star Wars saga, Izuku started, elbowing Todoroki with a grin. I don't want to watch the new trilogy or the prequels. They're not well written. Todoroki said bluntly, making Izuku snort out with laughter. Okay, fine. I have it all in the English dub with subtitles. Is that okay? Izuku asked, As they walked up to the metro, Todoroki nodded. Yeah, no problem. Subtitles or no subtitles, it doesn't matter to me, he says, shrugging. Izuku blinked, interested. Wait, you're fluent in English. Todoroki shrugged again, but the glint in his eyes gave away the fact he was pleased to be talking about it. Or, Izuku thought dryly, smug to be talking about it. Definitely the latter. It came naturally to me besides. My old man kept insisting I read English, so it's my second language, if anything. Izuku gawked for a moment. Wow, I only got around to speaking English for the past few years. My friend, ex-girlfriend, really, but friend was fine. Was American, and well, I picked up a lot from her, he said, noting with a more heartened grin at the way Todoroki was listening to him intently as he kept speaking. To watch movies in English with just a few years of practice is impressive, Todoroki said, causing Izuku's tongue to knot itself for lack of a proper response. How the hell was this guy so blunt and sincere? The train just then started, saving Izuku from having to say anything apart from a squeaky thank you, and from having to see Todoroki's face in response to that. Let Izuku just say this for himself. It's agony sitting next to Todoroki. Every time the train lurched slightly, Todoroki would find himself pressed against Izuku, who would then in turn find himself sandwiched between the shorter man and the armrest, allowing him to get a rather nice feel on how built warm Todoroki was, despite that lithe frame of his. It did not help Izuku's pathetic little crush in the slightest. Unfortunately for Izuku, this might have happened a few times, and what was more, this sudden contact would be punctuated with a breathless apology from Todoroki, causing Izuku to feel goosebumps around his neck as the hurried words were muttered next to his ear. As if Todoroki's deep voice wasn't enough to hear on a daily basis. Izuku widened his eyes when Todoroki stood up, and he found himself staring at the guy's nice, posterior. He had it bad. Real bad. Shit. To think he had chastised Ochako about teenagers only a while ago. Shit. The second they got out, Izuku heaved a sigh out of relief, breathing in pure air. The loveliness of air indeed. Thank God for air. Thank God. His side also felt extremely cold the second they stepped out. He huffed out a breath, glaring blearily up at the sun. Is the train always this crowded? Todoroki's curious voice asked, bringing Izuku out of his thoughts. Izuku blinked, before looking at Todoroki, who seemed rather concerned. Confused, he blinked for another 3 times before Todoroki's question registered in his brain. Huh. Yeah, lots of people take the train. It's not as bad as you think, though, Izuku said, with a reassuring smile. Todoroki raised an eyebrow, as he pressed on his own neck repeatedly. Not that bad, my foot. I must have squeezed you a good 10 times. Todoroki muttered, making Izuku snicker. Izuku laughed, cheeks flushed, as they walked towards his apartment. I don't mind. It's a regular occurrence, you know. Midoriya, you need to revise your opinion on what needs to be minded, Todoroki said dryly, and Izuku laughed out loud, before pressing the elevator button. Which floor? Todoroki asked curiously, as the elevator doors opened to reveal a thankfully empty space. 4th. The view is awesome, Izuku said, grinning. Todoroki had an unreadable look on his face when Izuku turned, but he didn't think it was anything bad. If anything, he thought Todoroki might have been utterly confused at Izuku's way of living. It was yet another endearing trait of Todoroki's on anybody else. This conventional obliviousness of rich people might have looked annoying, but you couldn't be annoyed with Todoroki of all the people. Izuku hummed to the elevator music, as Todoroki looked around. How long have you been living here? Todoroki asked, breaking the lack of conversation. Izuku stopped humming, grunted in question before registering the question again. Well, since college. I didn't want to make it harder for my mom, you know. Besides, she takes care of Ochako most of the time, Izuku explained. Todoroki blinked before realizing Izuku was referring to Ochako. Right. I keep forgetting your Araka is practically your little sister, right? Izuku laughed fondly. Yeah, she is. Couldn't have asked for anyone better. Why does your mom take care of her, if you don't mind me asking? Her parents work abroad most of the time, on construction projects. Ochako meets them thrice a month, though. And of course, they call her every day. They're good people, Izuku said, leaning back against the elevator and smiling. Todoroki hummed contemplatively before responding. I can't relate having a younger sibling, considering I am the youngest sibling, he said dryly, making Izuku grin at him. No way. Todoroki huffed. Unfortunately, my oldest brother never lets me forget it, he said, cheeks flushing slightly from the AC. Izuku blinked. Wait, you have a sister, Fayumi-san. Todoroki nods. One older brother, 𝐀𝐦, and another, Natsuo. 𝐀𝐦 is the oldest, he explained, looking disgruntled. Izuku chuckled. Nice. You must have had a lot of fun with them, right? Todoroki nodded, a fond smile gracing his face. Yeah, but... His expression darkened briefly. That only happened after Mom divorced the shitty old man. I must have been 9 at the time. Until then, I wasn't allowed to talk to my siblings. Izuku grimaced. Pardon my language, but, what the FCK, Todoroki-kun. Todoroki chuckled humorlessly. My old man was a perfectionist through and through. Add narcissism to the mix, and you basically got yourself a megalomaniac. My older siblings weren't what he was looking for some reason. He wanted them to be, what was it? Perfect enough to run the company. Then I came along, and when they tested my ick, he tapped his own forehead. And then I kept excelling everything I did at school. I don't think I've ever seen the old man so happy. Of course, he never physically abused us, but it was hell. Izuku really wanted to punch Todoroki's father. Abusive parents merited that much. Think you'll let me punch him? He asked, miming a punch. Todoroki stared at him, eyes wide, before he chuckled into his palm. I know you box in your free time, Midoriya. But the old man used to be a competitive wrestler, he said, voice shaking with laughter as his mismatched eyes crinkled with mirth. Izuku pouted. What, you think I can't take on a retired wrestler? Todoroki blinked. You're serious? Izuku smirked, unable to help but feel a little cocky under the other's disbelieving stare. I don't think your dad would know how to fight dirty now, would he? So you're saying if it came to it, you'd fight dirty? Todoroki murmured, looking at him in interest. Definitely. Wait, why are you surprised at the thought of me fighting dirty? Izuku asked, straightening up in surprise upon noting Todoroki's amused face. Todoroki smiled slightly, mischievous. Well, I thought you were one of those goody two-shoes. To be honest, Izuku pouted. That's not true, he mumbled, blushing as he rubbed the back of his neck. Todoroki chuckled. Not that I minded that assumption, but I don't mind the thought of you punching my father either. Provided, of course, you get out of it the winner. Izuku smiled, as the elevator doors opened just then. Well, we'll just have to find out one day, Todoroki-kun, won't we? Ah yes, if I can. I'll invite Nyai-san and Natsu for the show. They'd love it. Izuku turned back to grin wider. Well, can't leave them hanging now, can I? No, of course not. Todoroki said solemnly, making Izuku laugh. So, 𝐀𝐦 and the original Star Wars trilogy. Anything else? Izuku asked, as Todoroki followed him to the door. Todoroki shrugged. I just don't want to think of having to correct those assignments again. Good grief, what else do you have? Izuku worried his lip, contemplating what Todoroki would like. Ooh, I have the animated DVDs of the All Might comics. You want in? Yup. If you don't mind me staying over, of course. Todoroki said dutifully, making Izuku chuckle as he took out his keys. I wouldn't have suggested if I had minded, Todoroki-kun. You're a great guy to hang out with, Izuku said honestly, turning back to look at Todoroki once more. Todoroki's cheeks were slightly flushed once more, but he returned Izuku's smile. Thanks. I like hanging out with you too. Izuku squeaked, but then turned it into a cough as he twisted the doorknob. Thanks. He squeaked again when he heard Todoroki chuckle. 𝐲𝐿 didn't know what he was expecting exactly when he envisaged Midoriya's room, but the, brightly colored All Might den full of All Might paraphernalia was not what he would have imagined. And yet, Midoriya's room was a brightly colored All Might den indeed. You weren't kidding when you said you loved All Might, 𝐲𝐿 teased, making Midoriya squeak and flail his arms around in embarrassment. Cute. Well, I'm kidding. I don't mind, 𝐲𝐿 said, waving a hand. Midoriya perked up hesitantly, turning around to look at 𝐲𝐿 hopefully. Really? 𝐲𝐿 stared at him. This man. Midoriya. I'm literally wearing a Darth Vader t-shirt, he said, pointing to the incriminating piece of clothing. Midoriya laughed as he went inside a room, presumably to collect the 𝐀𝐦 volumes. Yeah, figures he's a better dad, right? 𝐲𝐿 nodded with all seriousness. Yes, despite the fact he cut off Luke's hand. 𝐲𝐡𝐢 didn't even know if he was that funny. But Midoriya seemed to genuinely even find him funny. If the way his laugh reminded him of his mother's whenever 𝐲𝐡𝐢 had tried to make jokes as a teenager was any indication. He smiled to himself slightly as Midoriya called out to make himself feel right at home. Who was Midoriya even kidding? If anything, he was the nice guy. 1 hour of rapid discussion later, and another hour of watching A New Hope, 𝐲𝐡𝐢 was regretting all of his life choices as Midoriya declared they both needed food at this point. It's better to enjoy movies with food and good company, he had said with an endearing grin. 𝐲𝐡𝐢 was a dead man. And 𝐲𝐡𝐢 realized he was very 𝐓𝐡𝐢𝐬 when he smelled soba. From the kitchen, Midoriya had remembered that he liked soba. Oh God. 𝐲𝐡𝐢 sat up straight, staring at his toes. He was done for. I don't know exactly how good it is, but I hope you like it, Midoriya said with a cheery grin, serving 1 plate of soba to 𝐲𝐡𝐢 while clutching his own bowl of katsudon. 𝐲𝐡𝐢 almost would have drooled if not for his admittedly good self-control. It smelled so good. The wasabi and onions made it smell so good. I take it you're liking it already? Midoriya asked, smiling widely when 𝐲𝐡𝐢 attacked the noodles vigorously. 𝐲𝐡𝐢 grunted out with a nod, slurping away on half his noodles. He knew he must be looking like a pig right now. But he couldn't help it. This was easily the best soba he had had since his mom's. He had to eat this. Had to eat the soba. Soba. Good. Very good. That's all 𝐲𝐡𝐢's brain was coherent enough to process now, even as The Empire Strikes Back played in the background. 𝐲𝐡𝐢 must have missed a good quarter of the movie, but his soba was worth it. He could always watch the dumb movie later. He didn't notice Midoriya's very fond smile, and went on slurping the soba. Luckily, he managed to get his brain out of thinking about how good the soba was just in time to see Luke and Vader duel. Yet the way Midoriya was pressed close next to him, enough to not make it uncomfortable, he couldn't really complain, drew his mind away from the movie. It felt good. 𝐲𝐡𝐢 could honestly say this was the most comfortable he felt in a long time. 𝐲𝐡𝐢 must have dozed off somewhere in The Return of the Jedi, when Leia and Han started arguing about Luke. He didn't know how long it had been, but he felt something nudge him gently, and he blinked blearily, before darkness hit his eyes. Blinking more now, 𝐲𝐡𝐢 sat up straight, yawning, before turning, only to be faced with Midoriya's amused smile. He then looked down, realizing he had been sleeping on Midoriya's shoulder. And that there was a blanket over himself. A grinning All Might stared back at him, hand out in a peace sign. Not that 𝐲𝐡𝐢 could bring himself to agree with that much enthusiasm at the moment. Oh God. Oh God. 𝐲𝐡𝐢 could hear Talia and Natsuo cackling from the very depths of 𝐓𝐡𝐢𝐬 hell itself. You dozed off when Leia and Han started talking. I paused it, and had a nap myself, Midoriya said softly, grinning as 𝐲𝐡𝐢 swallowed and scooted away a bit for comfort. He felt beyond mortified, trickles of embarrassment tingling his skin. What's the time now? He asked in a small voice. I'm guessing it's 4 p.m.? Oh yeah, it's 4:15. Midoriya asked, boyish voice now husky with sleep, as he blearily looked at his watch. That did not help 𝐲𝐡𝐢's already mortified psyche either. We still haven't watched the All Might movies yet. Or, 𝐲𝐡𝐢 felt awfully selfish, but he did want to watch it with Midoriya. It seemed like something that he'd be genuinely excited about, and 𝐲𝐡𝐢 wanted to see Midoriya in such a light, far away from the stress of school. I'm really pathetic, 𝐲𝐡𝐢 thought in distress for a moment before he spoke. No. 𝐲𝐡𝐢 swallowed some air in and out, before ensuring that his breath was good to go. We'll watch it. I don't have the DVDs. He lied, selfishly wishing Midoriya didn't move. It was nice to have Midoriya's solid and very warm body next to his. You sure? Midoriya asked, green eyes concerned. Positive. You got any assignments or notebooks to correct? 𝐲𝐡𝐢 inquired, wrapping the blanket closer to himself, despite the laws of common sense. Midoriya didn't seem to mind, however. Nope. You? No. So, marathon. Midoriya grinned. All right then. Do you want to continue with the Star Wars movie? 𝐲𝐡𝐢 didn't think he was in any fit state to slog through and grieve Darth Vader's death. No problem. Alas, his brain-to-mouth filter had different ideas. Here, have the blanket, Todoroki said, almost hesitantly, as he handed over the blanket, just before Izuku could get up to change the DVD. Izuku was going to be truthful. He didn't mind the image of Todoroki huddled up in his blanket like a kitten. At all. If you feel cold, you can have it, Todoroki-kun, he said, smiling. Todoroki looked like a deer in headlights, utterly bewildered. You sure? Izuku chuckled. Todoroki-kun, you're the one who felt cold. I don't mind you using my blanket, and I trust you to keep it clean. So, we'll watch Heroes Rising first, okay? Todoroki blinked, before huddling himself in the blanket further. Right. Izuku almost whined when All Might bowed to the first user of One for All's grave, and the end credits rolled, and he caught Todoroki's eye. Did one of the best days of his life have to end that quickly? That was something else. Todoroki said softly, still huddled up in the blanket. Izuku let out a small puff of air in agreement, nodding. He knew exactly what Todoroki meant. That inspiring way All Might, weakened and battered, still saw himself as a wielder of one of the greatest powers in the universe. After going through such a painful journey of never having accepted himself, his own power. Yeah, All Might always is, Izuku said, just as softly. He then turned to look at his watch. It showed 7:30. You'll have to catch the train now. Or would you like to have dinner before you go? Izuku asked, looking at Todoroki. Todoroki shook his head. I'll have takeout. I imposed too much already. Izuku snorted. None of that now, Todoroki-kun. You can have dinner and leave then, he said firmly, ignoring Todoroki's protests and getting up with a low groan, stretching his arms and yawning while he was at it. Damn, he really needed to jog a mile more tomorrow morning. His joints were aching already, he thought in annoyance. He didn't notice Todoroki staring at the sliver of his stomach peeking out from his shirt with a blush on his face. Why'd you ask me then? Todoroki huffs out, but the huffy tone lacks any heat. Izuku just chuckles. Because it's polite. And unlike what some people choose to believe, politeness is a social construct that is pleasant to follow. Izuku teases in a moment of boldness, making Todoroki snort. Pleasant to follow, my foot. Todoroki says, rolling his eyes, making Izuku laugh even as he's busy pressing on his own neck. Once he's done, he heaves a huge breath out of relief, feeling his body ache much less, and that was why, Izuku mused very wisely to himself. He was never going to stop exercising. You okay with udon and tonkatsu? Izuku inquired, looking back at Todoroki. I told you. Todoroki then shut up at the dry look on Izuku's face before huffing. Fine, thank you, Todoroki said, voice soft once more. There. Wasn't so hard, was it? Izuku asked with a grin, clapping Todoroki's shoulder on the way to the kitchen. Izuku smiled when he heard Todoroki grumble something fondly. They ate dinner in silence, before Todoroki broke it. Izuku was starting to find that Todoroki wasn't going to talk or initiate conversation until he felt completely ready to trust you, or unless, well, his anger got the best of him. He knows this from personal experience. He's glad that it's more of the former these days than the latter. I'm guessing you got to cook this well from college? Izuku laughed bashfully. He wasn't expecting Todoroki to like his food this much, but maybe cooking classes were good for something after all. Not that Izuku hadn't known this before, but he was especially thankful right now. Nah. I lived only on ramen back at college. I actually took cooking classes after college, he explained, grinning. Todoroki raised an eyebrow curiously. Considering you cook very well, it's kind of surprising that these cooking classes helped you out in such a short time, he says, sincere. Izuku blushes and sputters a little, clutching on to his bowl of udon a little more before chuckling sheepishly. You think so? Todoroki nods. I do. How come you took them so late anyway? Izuku chuckled nervously, that innocent question causing him to remember that one incident at Mr. Yagi's house that involved a squawking, half-alive, half-roasted chicken, a 13-year-old Katsuki screaming at said chicken, Ochako squealing in laughter as the chicken chased around Katsuki, and Mr. Shouta glaring at the chicken from his sleeping bag, all while Mr. Yagi had been lying faint on the floor. And well, Izuku had, stared at the whole scene in paralyzed fear. And Mr. Shouta had promptly declared he'd pay for cooking classes on the condition that Izuku attend them immediately. Let's just say I should have checked to see if the chicken to be roasted was alive or not, Izuku said, voice very small. Todoroki stared at him with unblinking, unreadable eyes, before he bit on his lower lip and turned away, shaking. Izuku wilted visibly when the telltale sound of laughter softly bubbled out of Todoroki, sulking before smiling. Oh, come on, Todoroki-kun, Izuku protested, his own voice shaking with laughter. Todoroki now fully burst out laughing, and Izuku hid his smile behind his chopsticks, before laughing as well, feeling warm and happy in a way that was completely different. But Izuku wouldn't give up that feeling, that giddy rush accompanied by an encompassing joy, for anything in the world. Even if he knew he was well and truly gone for Todoroki 𝐻𝐸. And he was, wasn't he? Izuku stopped laughing, just as Todoroki, still covered in that infernally cute blanket, turned to look at him with eyes red from laughing. Hair now tied up in a messy bun, some of the slightly wavy strands framing his face, and smiling softly, a dimple dancing at the edge of one cheek. He really did like Todoroki, huh? He really did wish this could have been a date. Oh, Izuku thought, eyes wide for a moment, even as Todoroki kept laughing silently. Oh, I really like him. Ochako and Katsuki stared at Izuku jogging petulantly the next morning while mumbling out something unintelligible. You think half and half sensei broke him yesterday? Katsuki muttered to Ochako, staring at Izuku the whole while. Ochako winced. Yikes. He's got it bad, huh? No FC King kidding. Katsuki said, almost amazed. Windfall blooper series no. 4. I'll tell you why I'm so intent on bringing down 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝐻𝐸. Cut. The cameraman stared at Tauya like he had grown another head, and it was all Keigo could do not to laugh. I was supposed to say 𝗬𝗏𝗄𝐻𝐸, wasn't I? Tauya said, facepalming. Keigo snickered. Babe, you might not want to announce you hate your dad on national television. FCK this. Tauya said, voice muffled even as Keigo laughed. Cut, Tauya blinked, before removing his shirt completely. What's wrong? A muffled noise came from somewhere, and Tauya turned to stare at the source, getting more confused when Keigo whistled innocently. Oh, FC King hell. That wolf whistle a few days ago may not have been imagined then. Tauya glared at Keigo, who smiled sheepishly. Ochako knew that maybe she should cool down. Let Izuku breathe. She'd certainly need time after having spent a whole day with Mr. Todoroki of all the people, and not harass him with questions. Ida would certainly tell her as much. But she couldn't freaking help it. She needed to know all the details about it. Alas, she missed Auntie 𝐀𝐻𝐸's call with Deku last night. Damn it, homework. More importantly, Mr. Todoroki needed a sense of humanity. This Sunday afternoon, however, Ochako was not letting it rest. At lunch, she caught Auntie 𝐀𝐻𝐸's eye, and smiled cheerily, making sure her dimples were on full angelic display. Auntie 𝐀𝐻𝐸, did Deku-kun call after Todoroki-sensei left? Ochako asks, innocently. Of course, Auntie 𝐀𝐻𝐸 is a blessed woman who splendidly goes into a rapture of delight. Just as Ochako wanted. Oh yes, Izuku's head over heels for him, you know? He kept talking about how Todoroki-kun enjoyed the meals he cooked, and how he was such a good friend yesterday. I'd like to see this young man for myself. I've heard too much about him, 𝐀𝐻𝐸 said, excited. Ochako grinned. I'll get you a photo of him, if you want, Auntie. She knew far too many girls in a group chat who would happily perk up at the chant. Sure. Auntie 𝐀𝐻𝐸 widened her eyes. Really? Can I see? Ochako grinned wider, and held up a finger, sending a text to Ashido. You, 12:45 p.m. Hey Ashido-chan. Ashido, 12:45 p.m. You called darling you, 12:45 p.m. Got any good photos of Todoroki-sensei? Deku-kun's mom hasn't seen him yet. Ashido, 12:46 p.m. You came to the right place honey. Sent. To-do-sensei being cute with Mido-sensei. JPG. Ochako grinned at the photo of her Japanese teacher smiling as Izuku was caught midway speaking about something. Perfect. She doesn't really want to know how Ashido got that on camera. But hey, she needed it right now, so no biggie. Holding up her phone, she giggled when Auntie 𝐀𝐻𝐸 looked at the photo with joy, and then widened her eyes as Auntie 𝐀𝐻𝐸 squealed. Auntie 𝐀𝐻𝐸 looked at the photo, blinking. Ochako, dear? Ochako blinked, wondering why Auntie 𝐀𝐻𝐸 looked so strange. Yeah, Auntie. What's his name? Ochako blinked again. Todoroki 𝐻𝐸 said. Why? She then stared at Auntie 𝐀𝐻𝐸, quite disbelieving at the reaction that followed. Oh, this is Ray-chan's son, then. 𝐀𝐻𝐸 burst out to herself, eyes wide. Ochako blinked. Wait, what? 𝐀𝐻𝐸 practically vibrated with excitement. Todoroki Ray, or better, she chuckled. Yukimura Ray, she divorced her husband a long time ago. I'd know her son anywhere. He looks just like her. 𝐀𝐻𝐸 squealed, joyfully. Ochako gaped. Huh, 𝐀𝐻𝐸 laughed. I'm getting ahead of myself here. I do need to talk to Ray-chan and see if she knows about this, she said, with another squeal, taking out her phone. Ochako vibrated in her own chair. The teachers' moms knew each other. At this rate, Ochako, she thought proudly, might be a stellar matchmaker. She then sat up straight, listening as Auntie 𝐀𝐻 called up Mr. Todoroki's mother, grinning widely. "Hello, Ray-chan?" 𝐀𝐻 then nodded, smiling. "Yup, it has. I'm fine, dear. Oh, you're too kind. I'm glad you're doing so well. Is your son working at 𝐸 Academy by any chance?" 𝐀𝐻 gaped, before laughing. "Oh, yes, that's my Izuku. Yes, that'd be the same boy. Oh, Ray-chan, this is too good. Oh, okay. Okay, that's fine. I'll talk to you later." 𝐀𝐻 got off the phone with the happiest smile on her face. And Ochako might faint at how good her luck is right now. "Auntie 𝐀𝐻, how do you know Todoroki-sensei's mom?" Ochako asked, amazed. 𝐀𝐻 giggled. "We were friends at the same high school, Ochako dear. I can't believe this happened. It's perfect," she said, rubbing her hands in glee. "Yeah, me too," Ochako said faintly. "Giddy. You're shitting me," Katsuki said faintly, when they stopped by a popsicle place later that evening, as they usually did. It was their thing, just Ochako and Katsuki's thing. Popsicles rocked, and not even grumpy Katsuki could challenge that. Ochako grinned. "Pay up now, Kakin. Half and half sensei nor nerd sensei made a move yet. You still ain't one shit." Katsuki snarled, and Ochako smirked. "Oh, that can be remedied," Ochako trilled, grinning. "You wouldn't happen to know anybody called Yukimura Ray, now would you?" Katsuki asked his mom that night, dreading the answer. Mitsuki blinked. "Well, yeah. Sweetest lady I ever knew after 𝐀𝐻, of course. Heck," she grinned before pecking her husband's cheek, who blinked in surprise and then blushed. "Had a crush on her for a while, but she got married early, I think. That's why no one's heard a peep out of her." Katsuki choked on his noodles. "Wait, why ask?" Mitsuki asked curiously, as Masaru squeaked and handed his son a glass of water. "No reason," Katsuki croaked out, voice high. The next day at school, the class sent inquiring looks at Ochako, who winked with a thumbs up in reply when she came in. "What happened, Ochakan?" Tsuyu asked curiously, and Ochako shook with giggles, trying not to die. "It's going so well," Ochako squealed incoherently, shaking her head back and forth in joy. Tokoyami and Tsuyu exchanged a look that probably would have suggested a discussion on Ochako's sanity. But Ochako, being Ochako, didn't notice, blissful in the heavenly images of herself as a flower girl, as she sighed dreamily. "Uraraka, Aizawa-sensei is here." Tokoyami deadpanned. Ochako sat up straight, blushing furiously as the tired teacher entered in his sleeping bag. "Morning. Get out your textbooks. To page 279. Mr. Yagi, okay?" She was at school now, Mr. Aizawa droned. Ochako squeaked. "Right. Physics. Fun. Gotta get there." Before she got herself detention. "Girl, what happened?" Ashido yells at lunch, sliding her way next to Ochako and lunch. Ochako smirked, terribly proud. "Well," Ochako drawled, grinning as her friends looked on with interest and bemusement. "Hang on. Let me get the rest of the club," Ashido declared, running out, leaving Ochako with the other four. "You said your matchmaking operation was going well?" Tokoyami asked, looking interested. Ochako laughed. "Ha, yes. The best part is, Deku-kun's mom knows Todoroki-sensei's mom," Ida gaped. Xiaoji stared. Tsuyu widened her eyes. Tokoyami did a spit take, and Ochako was smug. "The universe must really like you, Ochakan." Tsuyu croaked out, amazed. Ochako grinned. "Yes, Tsu-chan. Yes it does. Matchmaking two teachers shouldn't be this easy," Xiaoji said, blinking. "Don't jinx it, geez," Ochako whined, pouting. "It's not like you got them to do more." Tokoyami shuddered at the mental images before shaking his head. Tsuyu patting his back reassuringly. "This is just the beginning, right?" Ochako nodded, now grinning again. "Yeah, but it's really going so well." Just then, a crowd stormed next to Ochako, and she was pelted with questions till the beginning of next period itself, causing her to be overwhelmed. A lot. Some questions were just downright risque, causing her to blush and vehemently deny them, while the others were overwhelmingly cute, giving her a lot of mental material to daydream over. All in all, Uraraka Ochako had a very good time at lunch, and became a little more popular among the general populace of 1A. "So, what next?" Ashido asked, looking excited. Ochako deflated, and the others looked at her in interest as well. She hadn't really thought that far ahead, given her excitement. She pursed her lips in thought, tapping her chin. "Let's lock him up in a closet," Kaminari cheered, looking far too enthusiastic for his own good. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 cringed. Were they going to make this come to a head this quickly? Would her friend react well to being shut in with his crush in a closet? And would they still remain in high school after having committed said deed without inadvertently becoming high school dropouts? Don't be an idiot, Jiruu muttered, swatting at his head, earning everybody's ears a whine from 𝐀𝐦. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 pouted as she absently hummed in frustration, going through a mental list of shoujo manga for ideas. What now? We don't have to lock them in a closet. I mean, not yet anyways, 𝐻𝐚𝐭 said slowly, the gears in her head working. People turned to look at her attentively, making her seem much more nervous. But as far as I know, it's only Deku-kun who's got a crush on Todoroki-sensei. We should, try getting a rise out of Todoroki-sensei too, So I'll, do something there, 𝐻𝐚𝐭 asked hesitantly, wincing. Surprisingly, Jiruu was the one who spoke up. Say, you're a raka. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 squeaked, before looking at Jiruu. Yes? Does Midoriya-sensei like any kind of music in particular? Jiruu asked, curious. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 blinked. He likes Yonzu Kenshi. That's all I know. Uo, and Brian the Sun too. And, Spire too, I guess. He really likes them. I don't know much else, she offered, looking sheepish. Jiruu smiled. Classic rock then. He's got good taste. I've got 2 tickets to a concert my dad got me, and I don't have much patience for it. The concert's on Saturday, and if anything, you can ask Midoriya-sensei to ask out Todoroki-sensei. If Todoroki-sensei does go, no matter what music genre he likes, I'm pretty sure he at least has a crush on Midoriya-sensei too. Kaminari gaped. Jiruu, I thought you didn't care? Jiruu blushed. Well, I'm not against it, sure. It's weird to be setting up your teachers without knowing they're gay or not, 𝐻𝐚𝐭 chuckled nervously. But if they are into each other, and if we can do something about it, then why not? Jiruu asks, shrugging. That's the spirit, Jiruu-chan, 𝐜𝐴𝐽 squealed, pinching the other's cheeks and earning herself protests from the other girl. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 giggled. Well, this time, hand over the tickets to me. I won't be giving them to him though. The others blinked at 𝐻𝐚𝐭 in surprise as she smirked. But he'll definitely be going to that concert, if I have a say in it. The class sent each other knowing grins save for Sourpuss Katsuki, and the ones in the dark like Yaoyorozu and Kirishima, and the proper ones like Ida and Tsuyu when Izuku and Mr. Todoroki smiled at each other as they entered and exited the classroom respectively. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 rubbed her hands with glee. This was easily the most fun she had in a century. Okay, maybe she didn't live that long, but this was definitely fun. Let me get this straight, 𝐴𝐽 said later, trying her hardest not to giggle. 𝐻𝐚𝐭, however, started giggling first, losing her self-control. The older woman then giggled along with her. You and your friends are setting up Izuku with Xiaodo-kun? 𝐴𝐽 asked, grinning. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 then stopped giggling, looking sheepish. 𝐴𝐽 chuckled, waving a hand. It's fun, dear, don't worry. I'm the last person who'll object to that. But try to be careful, okay? 𝐻𝐚𝐭 nodded vigorously, relieved that she wasn't going to get scolded. Right. So, if I hand these tickets to Izuku? 𝐻𝐚𝐭 grinned. Yep, Auntie 𝐴𝐽, you just gotta convince him to take out Todoroki-sensei too, 𝐴𝐽 winked. Will do, honey. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 punched the air with a grin, before taking out her phone and messaging the chat. The chat, aka the chat room where the matchmakers to be convened for their noble and holy calling. Created by Ashido this very evening, and who somehow had everybody's numbers. It was designed so that everybody would get in on the action, while 𝐻𝐚𝐭 deftly pulled the strings of this noble matchmaking act as best as she could. Which was usually followed by a happy ending. Operation: Get 2 homeroom teachers, you 6. 45 p.m. done guys. Auntie 𝐴𝐽 is totally in it. Ashido, 6. 45 p.m. OMG, I can't breathe, I cannot breathe. We totally set up Mido-sensei and to-do sensei for a date OMG Aoyama. 6. 45 p.m. All hail Uraraka Jiruu. 6. 45 p.m. Hail Uraraka. That's the only sensible thing about this chat, honestly. 0. 6. 45 p.m. Hail Uraraka you. 6. 45 p.m. Oskesk you guys. Kaminari. 6. 45 p.m. All come on Raka, you made up this totally awesome plan to get our teachers together. You deserve to be hailed, Queen. 𝐻𝐚𝐭 laughed at the incoming positive chat messages, grinning before switching over to Katsuki's chat. You 6. 45 p.m. Get wrecked, bitch blasty. 6. 46 p.m. FCKU. When Izuku got 2 tickets to a concert on Saturday from his mom, Wednesday night, He wasn't really sure what to think. "Where'd you get these, Mom?" Izuku asked dubiously, as he looked over the tickets. Sure, it was a Spire concert, but he wasn't sure she knew about it. Or anything about concerts for people his age anyway. What was going on? Inko laughed, albeit looking a tad too nervous. "Well, I got them from 𝐻𝐸-kun's friend, you know, the one, I keep forgetting his name. Silly me." Izuku raised an eyebrow. "Mom, you're telling me Hisashi-san passed up a chance to go to the hottest concert in Japan?" he asked, a little suspicious. Sure, something like Old Codex was more to Mr. Hisashi's tastes. But really, the man went to concerts with his boyfriend whenever he could. Which was nearly all the free time he had. Something was clearly weird. Yes, Inko offered, looking sheepish. Izuku shrugged. Maybe that was just the teacher-typical paranoia speaking. What was his mom going to achieve by tricking him? Sure. But who'd I go with anyway, he asked, frowning even as Todoroki's name came unbidden to his dumb brain. Inko's timid smile turned knowing. "Well, dear, think on it. I'm sure you'll know who to go with," she encouraged, patting his shoulder. Izuku blinked. Problem was, he did know who he wanted to go with. But did he want to go with Izuku? Would Todoroki find this weird? Or clingy? After all, he did come to Izuku's apartment last week. And they saw each other at school most of the time. So chances were, Todoroki would definitely find it clingy, and also refuse it. And then their friendship would be weird. His mother's smile is comforting and Izuku swallows. It turned out, Izuku did not have to worry about Todoroki's lack of interest in concerts at all. "You're going to a concert, and you want me to come with you?" Izuku pointedly ignores the way the other staff members perk up in interest at this conversation. He was an idiot. Honestly, why'd he think asking Todoroki out? Well, not out. In lunchtime, in a room full of nosy teachers was a good idea anyway. Gah, why don't I have any good ideas? Now I'm gonna look like an idiot. Izuku screamed to himself in his head. Say yes. He can hear Miss Kayama, the librarian, cheering from somewhere with a smirk on her face, and Todoroki widens his eyes briefly at the encouragement before shaking his head and clearing his throat. Sure, Todoroki says, cheeks slightly flushed pink. Izuku widened his eyes before laughing nervously. You're not just saying that so that the others will stop listening in on us, are you? He bursts out, eyes wide when he says it. Whatever he had wanted to say, that wasn't it. But before he could apologize, Todoroki reacts. Todoroki now widened his eyes in amazement, leaning in closer so as to say his words quietly, even though the move causes heat to rise to Izuku's cheeks, and the expression on his face is colored with a little bit of hurt. What? No. I want to go with you, Midoriya, he says, voice tinged with disbelief as he self-consciously tucks away a stray hair that came apart from his now messy bun. Izuku blushes. It's not just the way Todoroki's looking at him like he's crazy, or the way the man's blushing right now, which Izuku can't understand by the way, but it's the conviction in Todoroki's voice that takes him aback. Did Todoroki like spending time with him that much? It must be true, because he's quick to refuse Izuku's doubtful query. But, well, he can't deny it's flattering. Sorry. I still need to get used to the idea that people want to hang out with me. Izuku admits with a small timid chuckle, rubbing the back of his buzzed neck. You should get used to the idea, Todoroki says flatly, leaning back onto his chair with a shake of his head, as he absently fixes his tie with one hand. Again, that conviction. Izuku might just spontaneously combust and say goodbye to this world. The thing is, Todoroki is so unfailingly sincere, and that, instead of answering his self-doubts, is only creating newer ones. Were crushes, hopeless crushes, usually like this? Izuku only clears his throat, coughing and smiling. Well, thank you, Todoroki-kun, Izuku says shyly, grinning. Todoroki shakes his head, smiling slightly. Izuku wishes he can ignore the winks sent to him by Mr. Oboro and Mr. Hisashi. But alas, he couldn't. So, should I pick you up? I have a car. And we could always save time. It's supposed to rain on Saturday, if I remember correctly. Todoroki offers. Izuku chuckles. You just don't like the train, do you, Todoroki-kun? He says with a smile. Todoroki's expression sours comically before pouting slightly. Damn. It was cute. And Izuku's brain may have short-circuited a little. Hey, snap out of it. Izuku scolds himself before his brain settles to something more normal. Haha. I know your address anyway, and you wouldn't have to pay, would you? Izuku laughs. True that, Todoroki-kun. I was just joking around, he says, clapping the other's shoulder a little more gently. Todoroki huffs, but his eyes are softened with amusement. All right then. I'll pick you up at 6:30. Izuku looked at the concert venue. Yeah, that'd be great. We'll get there in time. All right then. Todoroki pauses and Izuku almost hopes one of them will say it's a date then. But he's not going to be that embarrassingly forward, so he shuts up. He finds himself feeling a little wistful after that. Friday evening is 𝐲𝐸's worst nightmare. Next time, he vowed to himself in annoyance, he was never telling 𝐲𝐬 or any of his annoying older siblings what he was doing with his free time. Never. 𝐲𝐸's been glaring at his laptop for the past half hour as Natsuo and Tauya snicker over his pathetic crush, while 𝐲𝐬 sighs. Why did I accept your request for a call again? 𝐲𝐸 mutters, rubbing his forehead. Because you're 𝐓𝐶 without us, baby brother. And we haven't got all day, either. Where's your closet? Tauya asks with a roll of his eyes, propping up his elbows on the table. 𝐲𝐸 glares at his older brother, in whose background 𝐀𝐦 is cooking something or the other, while wearing a cheesy apron, humming some inane K-pop song and dancing in a horrifically cheesy manner while he was at it. It was nothing short of bizarre. Then again, Tauya and 𝐀𝐦 weren't the most conventional couple either. They were literally the most annoying married couple. Drama, violence, excessive libido. One would think they would have burned to hell by now. Alas for 𝐲𝐸, the very annoying couple somehow married each other. For the last 𝐓𝐶 time, it's not a date. I keep telling you, Midoriya is just a friend. 𝐲𝐸 now grits out, pinching the bridge of his nose. And for the last 𝐓𝐶 time, where is your closet? Tauya drawled, propping his chin on his palm, squinting like he didn't need glasses. Loser. Unfortunately, 𝐲𝐸 was getting lectured by said loser. So that just made 𝐲𝐸's situation even more pathetic, unfortunately. Life, in short, sucked. 𝐲𝐸 grumbled under his breath and turned the laptop over to show his closet before opening it. There, happy now? Tauya gave him an impressive look. Shove the laptop closer, dummy. This is priceless. Natsuo wheezed, tears slipping out of his eyes as he kept chortling quietly in a corner. His own boyfriend, Tenko, was eyeing him out of confused concern, even as he expertly operated a switch. 𝐲𝐸 groaned. I'm perfectly capable of dressing myself for a concert. You two idiots, shut up. 𝐓𝐶 untrue. No, 𝐲𝐸. Seriously, 𝐲𝐸, you're gonna run with that? Get out the clothes. We'll tell you what you look good in. Chop, chop, little brother. Tauya commanded, looking severely unimpressed. 𝐲𝐸 groaned again before shoving his entire wardrobe out of the closet. Asshole, he muttered, before holding up a shirt and a pair of jeans. Tauya eyed them critically as Natsuo sat up straight, eyes wide. Wait, we're actually doing this? The latter asked, incredulous. Duh, Natsu, keep up. Oh, and Tauya, those jeans would be perfect, right? 𝐲𝐬 inquired, eyeing them with the same amount of critical intensity. 𝐲𝐸 himself appraised the jeans. They were nothing special. Just a pair of gray jeans that were kinda tight, if he remembered well. Okay. Not bad. But keep it on the side. We'll check everything else. Toss the shirt into the incinerator. It's lame. Tauya said, waving a hand. 𝐲𝐸 rolled his eyes and tossed it inside. It was going to be a long night. 𝐲𝐸 was right. It had been 3 goddamned hours of Tauya and 𝐲𝐬 arguing about 𝐲𝐸's looks, while Natsuo just kept chortling until Tenko had tossed the console at him and yelled at him to take the 𝐓𝐶 fashion show to the bedroom. At long last, they had come up with an admittedly good choice. There had been a black denim jacket 𝐲𝐸 hadn't even known he had bought. I bought that for your college graduation, you absolute heathen. Tauya had protested with a white Oxford shirt. We still need you to sell your look, 𝐲𝐸. 𝐲𝐬 had said with a wink, whatever that meant, and a pair of alarmingly dark indigo jeans that looked far too tight. Baby bro, listen to me. You got a good butt. As much as I hate to say it, you've got a good everything. For 𝐓𝐶's sake, you gotta know how much it hurts to tell you this. 𝐲𝐸 had rolled his eyes even as Tauya continued speaking. And you're going to a 𝐓𝐶 rock concert. Own it. So had Tauya said wisely, in response to the jeans. 𝐲𝐸 had glared at him for a good 10 seconds for that. Do not wear sandals with jean shoe. Oh my god. Natsuo now said, shaking his head. I don't wear sandals with jeans, 𝐲𝐸 protested, giving his brother the stink eye. Natsuo only grinned and blew a raspberry, making 𝐲𝐸 roll his eyes. That childish big lump, was somehow one of Tokyo's leading doctors. Unbelievable. You got any makeup? It'd go great with the look. 𝐲𝐬𝐬 gushed. 𝐲𝐸 scrunched his nose and thought. Makeup, 𝐀𝐦's gift flashes in his brain. I think I have some, I'm not sure. Gasp. If you don't actually have it, don't you dare call yourself my brother, you uncultured swine. Tauya deadpanned. Did you really just say the word gasp out loud? 𝐲𝐸 deadpanned back at the same time 𝗀𝐻𝐻 said it in disbelief. 𝐬𝐻𝐻, go with eyeliner. I'd personally suggest liquid eyeliner, it'd be great. 𝐀𝐦 said from behind Tauya, winking as he peeked out from behind his husband's shoulder. Tauya patted 𝐀𝐦's shoulder fondly. The pretty bird is right on this count. Some eyeliner would really make your eyes pop out. And go with some lip gloss just in case you get lucky, he said, grinning. 𝐲𝐸 blushed at the image of kissing Midoriya, swallowing and coughing at the image, making 𝗀𝐻𝐻 chortle and 𝐲𝐬𝐬 coo at him. 𝐹𝐶K, 𝐲𝐸 muttered intelligently. 𝐲𝐬𝐬 then laughed gently. Everything aside, just have fun with Midoriya-kun, okay? Sure. 𝐲𝐸 responds, face still red. Strawberry lip gloss then, 'cause 𝐲𝐸-kun looks like one himself and besides, strawberries make kissing awesome. 𝐀𝐦 said in the background, pecking Tauya's cheek. You know it, babe, you know it. Tauya said, ruffling the other's head, and boy did 𝐲𝐸 want it all to stop. Shut up, 𝐲𝐸 said, tiredly. Unfortunately for 𝐲𝐸, Tauya and 𝐀𝐦 did not shut up. And neither did anyone else. Send us photos, 𝐲𝐬𝐬 says, waving her hand in the form of a peace sign. Nope. 𝐲𝐸 deadpans and 𝐲𝐬𝐬 whines. Careful, your Tauya is showing, kiddo. 𝐀𝐦 says, grinning as he pinches Tauya's cheek, who grumbles something under his breath. 𝐹𝐶K off. 𝐲𝐸 says very intelligently. Okay, that's kinda creepy. He even rolls his eyes with it like you do. 𝐀𝐦 observes, looking at Tauya in surprise, who rolls his eyes in response. Tauya, Nai, and Shu have always been the edgelords of this family. 𝗀𝐻𝐻 said with a grin. Don't you dare call me an edgelord when he literally goes around acting as an edgelord on TV. 𝐲𝐸 protests with a pointed look at Tauya, as he sets to arranging his closet. You're sending photos or you're disowned. Older sibling privileges. Tauya says lazily, waving a hand before swatting 𝐀𝐦's hand. Older sibling nothing. I'm not sending you photos. 𝐲𝐸 says irritably, narrowing his eyes. Come on, we just want to see what Midoriya-kun looks like. 𝐲𝐬𝐬 says, pouting. Yeah, nice muscles doesn't cut it. Tauya says, smirking when 𝐲𝐸 flips him off. He's beefy? 𝐀𝐦 asks, eyes wide. Tauya nods with the most delighted grin in existence. 𝐲𝐬𝐬 blushed, sputtering out protests as 𝗀𝐻𝐻 cackled. 𝐲𝐸 blushes, gripping a shirt too tightly. You're way too old to be using the word beefy, 𝗀𝐻𝐻 says, shaking his head. I'll have you know I'm not even in my mid-30s yet, you brat. 𝐀𝐦 shoots back, making 𝗀𝐻𝐻 blow a raspberry at him. All right, good night, 𝗀𝐸 says abruptly, before waving. Night, 𝐲𝐬𝐬 says cheerily. Get some, baby bro, 𝗀𝐻𝐻 says, laughing good-naturedly when 𝗀𝐸 growls. Bye, 𝐀𝐦 says, waving. Night. Tauya says with a wave, eyes dancing. 𝗀𝐸 promptly takes another shirt and groans softly into it. Thursday rolls into Saturday, like Fridays never happened. Izuku's suddenly, really nervous. The concert is at 7 p.m., and while he keeps jogging and tripping several times while at it, as kindly pointed out by Katsuki, he's wondering, is he going too fast? In his feelings that was, Deku-kun, you're gonna trip again. Ochako says dryly, and Izuku squawks before skipping back a step, arms flailing around in a wheeling manner. Yikes. This is like the 10th time, Deku. The 𝐹𝐶K is going on in your head, Katsuki asks bluntly, glaring at Izuku in concern. Izuku swallows, inhaling and trying to breathe normally. Okay, I'm cool, I'm okay. Right. He mutters to himself, before exhaling out through his mouth. What's going on? Ochako asks, concerned. Izuku exhales. I kinda have somewhere to be at 7, and I'm a little nervous, he says, smiling reassuringly. Ochako raises an eyebrow, while Katsuki, ever the tactful one, asks, does half and half sensei have something to do with this? Izuku chokes, even as Ochako slaps the other boy's arm, resulting in an argument. Oi, you wanna go? Can't you see he's anxious, you idiot? I can. But is him bottling it up like that is simply doing wonders? Izuku raises his hands, stopping the argument. Guys, relax. I'm not anxious. Well, he chuckles at Ochako's pointed look. A little, okay, maybe a lot. He amends, grinning. You okay? Ochako asks, patting his arm with worry. Izuku breathes as he forces himself to stand still and confront what's been worrying him. Todoroki was just a friend. A friend he has a crush on, yes, but a friend nonetheless. He should be happy that he's accepted and free enough to hang out with Izuku. I should think about having a good time with him, and I will. Right as rain, Ochakan, Izuku says softly, smiling as he ruffles her hair. Ochako appraises him, before sighing and smiling back. You can tell us anything, you know that, right? Izuku chuckles. You do realize there are a few things I can't discuss with you? He teases. Woo boy, look who's a smartass. Katsuki deadpans, but he too has relaxed significantly. Ochako puffs out her cheeks with a pout. You know what we mean, Izuku laughed, warm. I do. And he knows it. Katsuki can't 𝐬𝐡𝐤 believe that Uraraka has been having this much of luck matchmaking two grown men. What the 𝐬𝐡𝐤? Was it that the two men were so incompetent that even a determined duck could set them together? Or was Uraraka just that competent? He's willing to believe the latter. The first one is too 𝐬𝐡𝐤 bizarre. But Uraraka hasn't 𝐬𝐡𝐤 won yet. There's still 3 weeks left for the dumb sports festival. He's not sure she'll get them together by then. He sure as hell isn't going to give away his cremator body pillow away that quickly. He paid a whooping 4,500 yen for that. And of course, his Kagami blanket. There's a whole ton of merch he got with good grades that could potentially leave him. Of course, Katsuki's not enough of a douche to downplay Uraraka's success. That was just 𝐬𝐡𝐤 stupid. And lame. Izuku's brain is found dead at 6:30 p.m. Todoroki's there at the doorway, smiling hesitantly as he stands there, looking like a rock star all on his own. Oh god. He was wearing eyeliner. Izuku can die happy now. He's just seen the most beautiful being in the universe and wait. 𝐬𝐡𝐤, was that a helix? You have a piercing, Izuku blurts out. And Todoroki looks startled before fingering his left ear with a small, pleased grin. Izuku can't believe he hasn't noticed it before. But that was probably because Todoroki's hair always got in the way of him getting a proper look. That, and Izuku didn't want to weird out Todoroki by looking way too long at his ears of all the places. Oh, yeah, my friend made me get one just before college finals. I let my bangs down so the students couldn't see it. So that's why you never saw it before. Todoroki explains, eyes dancing with amusement as his ponytail moved to the right with the way he shifted. Izuku looks and feels mortified. Oh, it looks good, Todoroki-kun. Wait, listen, just you look good, not just the piercing, he says, waving his hands around with widened eyes, before stopping and gulping. Well, he just royally embarrassed himself. Doh. Todoroki blinks, the expression on his face momentarily unreadable before a smile appears, despite the embarrassing ramble Izuku just let out. If Izuku hadn't been ready to swoon before, the shy, pleased smile on Todoroki's face sure was going to make him swoon. Thanks, Midoriya. And you look great, Todoroki says, nodding. That's it. Izuku died. Midoriya Izuku, found dead at his apartment as a result of brain death from a compliment from his crush. Done. May he rest in peace. You look great, too, Izuku squeaks out, face extremely hot right now. Oh, thanks, Todoroki says, looking startled, almost as if the returned compliment was unexpected. So, shall we? Izuku asks, clearing his throat and coughing. Yeah, sure, Todoroki says, his eyes a little too blank. Shadow was going to die, he thought in despair as he started driving. Holy hell, how did one man look good? For a concert. Midoriya looked far too good for his own good. He couldn't stop stealing glances at Midoriya every 2 seconds, and he knew if he didn't stop, he was probably going to get called out for it. And if that damned long-sleeved Henley wasn't a good see-through screen for those really nice arms, well, Shadow would have to be blind. The sad thing was that Shadow wasn't blind, despite many awkward rejections on his part at college and high school. It also meant that he had a nice peek at exactly how well-built Midoriya was, considering that the shirt was a 𝐬𝐡𝐤 V-line, and gave him a, well, view. Oh, not to mention the damn cologne. That wasn't good for his health either. Shadow was a dead man. He's just a coworker. He's just a coworker and a good friend. With nice muscles. A voice that suspiciously sounded like a gleeful 𝐀𝐦 finished in his head for him. Todoroki-kun, you want me to open the window? You're not looking so good. Midoriya says, looking worried. 𝐲𝐸 nearly accelerates the car a little too sharply by stomping the accelerator in his surprise and blinks, before calming down and shaking his head. No, it's nothing. I'm fine, Midoriya, don't worry. I'll just blast up the AC then, if that's okay with you? 𝐲𝐸 says, trying to sound reassuring. He thinks he succeeds because Midoriya's worried look clears a little before he smiles and nods. And 𝐲𝐸 then sighs out in relief, before dialing up the AC to 4. So, Todoroki-kun, you listened to Spire before? 𝐲𝐸 freezes. Shit, he hadn't thought that far ahead, he only came because he was free and wanted to spend time with Midoriya. The problem was he didn't listen to a lot of rock bands, despite having grown up with one Todoroki Tauya, finding them annoyingly loud. If anything, he liked singers like Shikata Akiko more anyway. No. I thought I should give them a listen. Tauya, well, he's talked about them before. 𝐲𝐸 lies quickly, and Midoriya seems to accept this terribly flimsy and clearly untruthful excuse with an excited grin, much to his relief. Well, they're really great. Their music is amazing to listen to, and most of their songs are really uplifting. Besides, this is an open-air concert, so you'll be able to enjoy them better. And 𝐲𝐸 lets himself smile as Midoriya rambled away. Izuku really thanked the gods above for letting him meet Melissa Shield, back in their final year of college. They kept in touch right now too, but if not for Mel, he honestly wouldn't have had any sort of fashion sense. Thankfully, he could confidently say he didn't look like a complete idiot next to Todoroki. Rolling up the sleeves of his shirt, he sighed out as Todoroki shut off the AC. Parking. Well, the concert should start now, right? Todoroki asked, taking out a phone and looking at the time. Izuku looked at his own wrist watch, wincing a little as the rather large watch snugly pressed against his wrist. Yeah, 7:05. Should be starting in 10 minutes. Concerts always start later than they say they will, he said, looking out and seeing a crowd wave around with their light sticks. Todoroki hummed in understanding, getting out of the car at the same time as Izuku, who then followed the younger before they winced at the size of the crowd. Is it always this crowded? Todoroki asked, looking apprehensive. Izuku chuckled. It's Spire, Todoroki-kun. Of course it's this crowded. But we can find a good spot, don't worry, he said reassuringly. Todoroki seemed to relax at that as he followed the other. Izuku then stiffened. The crowd really was huge, and if they didn't want to get lost, well, Todoroki-kun, hold my hand. That way, we won't get lost, Izuku said hesitantly, turning back to look at his friend. Todoroki seemed startled, before he swallowed and nodded. Okay, he said, voice small. Izuku blinked in surprise, but he smiled reassuringly and held Todoroki's hand, trying not to squeal out loud. The other's hand fit snugly in his, almost as if his hand was made to cover the entirety of the other's hand, and he swallowed as well, before leading the other to a less bumbling spot. The noise and cheers grew as the band appeared on stage, and Izuku squeezed his eyes shut to adjust his ears to the sound, before he inhaled and grinned, getting out his own light stick from his pocket and raising it up. Todoroki looked surprised, and Izuku noted absently that the younger man hadn't told him to let go of his hand yet. You want one? I got two, Izuku shouted, the noise requiring him to yell. Todoroki looked almost hesitant, but he then straightened up and nodded. Izuku handed him his stick, still not having let go of the other's hand, and took out his other light stick. Wave it with the crowd, okay? Izuku yelled, and Todoroki nodded. Okay, Todoroki yelled back, eyes now bright with anticipation as he raised his light stick with everyone else. And honestly, Izuku had never seen anything quite as beautiful as this. Todoroki's eyes, bright and wide as he looked on at the now performing band. Blue, red, pink lights dancing on him, and somehow making him shine. Izuku still held on to Todoroki's hand, even when they cheered for the band, even when Todoroki yelled to tell him that the band was amazing. Not even when it started raining 2 songs later did Todoroki let go of his hand in Izuku's. He wanted it to stay that way for a long, long time. They got severely drenched, but it hadn't dampened their spirits any. No, 𝐲𝐸 thinks mutinously. It had only drawn out his latent teenage hormones even more. Thankfully, his eyeliner hadn't been smudged. No. The problem was, if he thought Midoriya had looked great before, the man sure looked hot when wet. Very hot, if anything. The other problem was that Midoriya had let go of his hand the second the concert ended 2 hours later. "I'm so sorry, I didn't think this'd happen," Midoriya yelled as they ran under the pouring rain, back to 𝐲𝐸𝐻's car. "That's okay," 𝐲𝐸𝐻 said, wanting to kiss the other man senseless with 𝐲𝐸𝐻 complaining right now. When that now impossibly sticky wet shirt of Midoriya's left absolutely nothing to his accursed imagination. Briefly, he can hear 𝐀𝐦 𝐍𝐸 cackle in his head for his pent-up sequel frustration, and he scowled before quickly opening the car door and sitting in it. Waiting for Midoriya, he shook his head and removed his hair tie, shaking his head again before threading his fingers through his erring and terribly tangled hair with one hand and switching on the car heater with another. He sighed in relief as the heat filled the car comfortably, and just then, Midoriya opened the door and took a double take upon seeing him. "Is there something on my face?" 𝐲𝐸𝐻 asked, considerably startled as Midoriya kept staring at him. And flustered too, but who was checking anyway? Instinctively, he checked at his eyeliner, confused when it didn't smudge on his fingers. No, it's Midoriya coughed hoarsely into his fist, before blushing. I never, this is kinda weird, but I never saw you with your hair down before." 𝐲𝐸𝐻 widened his eyes. It's, a really good look," Midoriya amended, smiling sheepishly and rubbing the back of his neck. As he did so, his shirt stuck to his muscles even more invitingly and 𝐲𝐸𝐻 cleared his throat. "Oh, well, maybe. Thank you," 𝐲𝐸𝐻 said, thankful his dignity hadn't gone into tatters yet. He also wanted to say that wet was a good look on Midoriya, but he was sure it was going to look more than weird, so he just nodded and started the gear. The car was filled with silence, a strange one. It was almost anticipatory. At least it felt that way to just 𝐲𝐸𝐻, probably. When he chanced to look at Midoriya, the other was drumming his fingers on the car window and humming to one of the songs they just listened to, his eyes contemplative. "Did you enjoy the concert, Todoroki-kun?" Midoriya asked, hopefully. 𝐲𝐸𝐻 had. Truthfully, 𝐓𝐸 was a good band, he'd have to check them up on Spotify as soon as he could. But he had enjoyed being with Midoriya, holding his hand and the current view much more. "Yes, I had a good time. Thank you, Midoriya," 𝐲𝐸𝐻 said, smiling slightly. Midoriya perked up. "Really? I'm glad to hear that, though." He pouted now, and 𝐲𝐸𝐻 felt concern. "We couldn't take any photos," Midoriya said, a little dejectedly. "We can take one when we go back to your apartment," 𝐲𝐸𝐻 offered. He had no plans on sharing it on any of the social media accounts Natsuo had made for him, however, or sharing it with his insufferable siblings. "You sure?" Midoriya asked, hopeful once more. 𝐲𝐸𝐻 nodded. "Yeah, I'll hold you to that," Midoriya said with a grin. Just then, 𝐲𝐸𝐻's phone rang, and he slowed the car, frowning as he took it out. He then glared at his phone because on the screen, there was a Skype request for a video call from his irritating siblings. Well, irritating brothers and brother-in-law, and 𝐬𝐬. "Ugh," 𝐲𝐸𝐻 grumbled, before rejecting it. The call appeared again, and he rolled his eyes before putting it on silent. He then put it on the roof of the car radio, watching it vibrate with a satisfied air. "I get the feeling that call's important," Midoriya said, hesitant. "It's only my siblings," 𝐲𝐸𝐻 said, a little too loftily perhaps. Midoriya looked interested, his mouth parting in surprise. "Oh, all of them?" 𝐲𝐸𝐻 nodded. "They'll just be annoying me while I drive. I'll call them back when I get back home." Midoriya eyed the vibrating phone before eyeing 𝐲𝐸𝐻 with a small smirk on his face. "I didn't peg you for a little brat, Todoroki-kun," he teased, voice cheerful and friendly in a way that made 𝐲𝐸𝐻 sure of the humor behind it. 𝐲𝐸𝐻 blushed both at the smirk on Midoriya's face and at the words. "Well, you grow up with 3 older siblings, you do eventually become a brat in some way," he managed out, shrugging. Midoriya chuckled, making 𝐲𝐸𝐻 blush even more. "I wouldn't know, I'm kind of an older sibling myself," Midoriya said, grinning cheerfully. 𝐲𝐸𝐻 glared at him playfully with a raised eyebrow, making Midoriya snicker into his fist. "Older siblings are the worst. That's the truth," 𝐲𝐸𝐻 said ominously. "The brat hung up on us," Natsuo said to the other two, expression tinged with awe. "The FC king little shit," Talia breathed out, while 𝐀𝐦 laughed himself into his grave next to him. 𝐬𝐬 was pouting. "I don't think he'll send us any photos, will he?" Tenko stared at them from behind Natsuo, even as he played on his Switch, raising an eyebrow. "No offense, guys, But it should have been obvious that he never was planning on to. He said loudly, making Keigo wheeze again. Taoya tapped his forehead with a finger. Hate to say this, but Shimura's on to something. Tenko blew a raspberry from behind Natsuo. Natsuo, why are you dating this little shit again? Natsuo pouted. We're in love. Tenko blushed. Stop, you dummy. He whispered, mortified. Midoriya laughed out loud at the comment, and Shadow felt warm, in a way that had nothing to do with the car heater at all, as he watched the older man laugh heartily. I'm falling for this guy way too fast, aren't I? The thought was momentary, far too fleeting for Shadow to catch. But he sensed it anyway, and he swallowed. Well, he thought blandly as he took a selfie of the both of them in the car hours later, when they reached Midoriya's apartment, and waved a goodbye to him. He was 𝐓𝐡𝐢𝐬. I'll send the pic to your number, Shadow said, and Midoriya brightened. Okay, bye, Shadow waved, exhaling. He really was 𝐓𝐡𝐢𝐬, God. Didn't I know that already? Shadow thought dryly, driving back to his house. He was well and truly in it too deep for Midoriya Izuku. Acha, 9:55 p.m. Hey Deku, Auntie Inko told me you went out with to-do sensei, is it true? Izuku choked on his food, staring at the text. What? You, 9:55 p.m. What? No. It was just a concert, why would she say that? Acha, 9:55 p.m. You, 9:56 p.m. Acha, get back to sleep. Acha, 9:56 p.m. I want a pic first, you gotta have taken a pic, right? You, 9:56 p.m. Listen here, you can't share this with anybody at school. It's pretty undignified. Acha, 9:57 p.m. Cross my heart and hope to die. You, 9:57 sent image. The image is of Izuku and Todoroki looking at the phone while sitting to each other as close as they can without the gear getting in the way. Izuku is holding up a peace sign with a grin on his face, and Todoroki is smiling softly. Acha, 9:57 p.m. OMG, you guys got drenched? You guys okay? Wow, you look dorky as usual with the peace sign and the grin. You, 9:57 p.m. I'm fine, thanks for asking. Acha, 9:57 p.m. lol, wait, to-do sensei looks like a supermodel. You, 9:57 p.m. can't disagree there. Listen Ochako, I have to tell you SMTH, but you can't tell anybody about this, not even mom. I'm sure she knows. But that's not the point. Acha, 9:58 p.m. What? You, 9:58 p.m. I like him, Todoroki. I mean, I really like him. You can't tell anybody this, or I'm doomed. Acha, 9:58 p.m. Honey, I knew that already. You, 9:58 p.m. Was it that obvious? Acha, 9:58 p.m. I'm not gonna dignify that with a response. But go for it, Deku. I think he likes you too. Izuku swallowed. You, 9:59 p.m. You think so? Acha, 9:59 p.m. I know so. It's a teenager thing. Sleep, okay? Night. Izuku smiled softly. You, 10 p.m. Night. Acha. Love you. Acha, 10 p.m. Love you too, Deku. Windfall blooper series. No. 5. Himiko, please stop dancing on the sets. You're no fun, Mr. Director. God, Seijiro thought in resignation. This is why he told Izuku being a teacher was hard. And yet what the brat did anyway. Become a teacher. Children. He should probably call Inko and Izuku this Sunday and tell him he could visit them. La 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 la. Oh, stop it, Keigo. Cut. Taoya glared at him. Great. We gotta do the dumb scene another time. Keigo pouted. In my defense, I didn't know the camera was rolling. Taoya stared. How was Keigo an internationally recognized actor again?